Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Bazooka01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender here at the AstroPub, your space bar at the end of the universe. I am also your professor on the Astro Historian, and of course your moderator here on the Captain's Table podcast. As just a quick reminder, we do have also the Captain's Table on Spotify. So you can check us out on Spotify or any pod where fine podcasts are available, as well as our new YouTube channel, the Captain's Table Podcast. So at the Captain's Table Podcast, all one word. It'll be in the description below. As we move along and get that channel growing and hopefully get it to the point where it is able to be advertised on by YouTube to help promote it more and get that content flowing. We'll probably eventually move these live streams to there. But until then, it's going to be here at youtube.com/TheAstroPub live and twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, which will always be on twitch.tv/TheAstroPub to watch us on Saturdays. So with that all out of the way, let's get started with talking about the main topic. Well, let's introduce people first. So I'm going to start off with the person over here, the very, very finely dressed man with the very nice shirt, Algrid. Who are you, Al? What are you doing, Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
Now, Paulie, as you were saying before, this is a wonderful Hearthstonian shirt.
Oh, yes.
So, yes, one-of-a-kind batik shirt because it's made up of different patches of batik. I am Al Garrett. I'm one of the Info Runners. I love lore.
Yeah. Also, a member of the On Hiatus Lore Citizen podcast, which we got to bring back.
That's right.
Point, so.
That's right. One of the Lore Citizen podcast folk, with the other esteemed member of our panel here, Jail. So, Jail, who are you?
Yeah, who are you, Jail? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
I'm Jail. I have a YouTube channel, Jail, and I do mostly. I'm mostly known for doing stuff about languages, but I tend to also just make videos about little details in Star Citizen stuff that I find interesting. And I too have fond memories of the Lore Citizen podcast.
We'll get back to it at some point. I'll figure out.
He is also.
Go ahead.
Jail is also a barkeep in his own right. The mixer of Xi'an drinks, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually sort of like, I'd be concierge only on prizes won from like cooking contests. If you just had the cash value. And I'm also an owner of a very snazzy shirt with medieval marginalia on the shoulders and
nice.
Even more on the back. So snazzy shirt day, I think.
I like it. Yeah. And last but not least, a new face to the podcast, but not a new to the community. You've been around for a while, I know, right? Mats, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Mats the Blue Eye. I'm, mostly, except most of the time, I'm just a regular player since 2013. So, and I'm following the project like on a technical phase, and I really like the in-depth lore stuff, and I'm trying to start a YouTube channel. I hope I can get it running soon for the German community to get us involved in the lore of Star Citizen a little bit more. So yeah, hope that's coming soon.
Yeah, I did link his YouTube channel in the Discord in the description below for those of you on YouTube. So it's Mats, and just like it's spelled there, MATZE, Blue Eye. So
exactly,
that one. So
that's the main channel. I will link the lore dedicated one as soon as that's up and running.
Okay. So keep an eye out on that one. All right. So today I brought a bunch of lore heads here because we're going to talk about lore. And as I always am going to plug, if you enjoy lore, I do an entire channel that's dedicated to Star Citizen and other space and science fiction lore called The Astro Historian. Go check it out if you haven't already done so. But the big thing that kind of the catalyst for this, someone's echoing a little bit. Who is? I think it's Al. He might be echoing.
I think it will be because the rest of us are on headphones.
Okay, yeah. So just turn down a little bit there, Al, maybe?
I am on headphones.
Oh, we're all on headphones.
I don't know. I'll keep talking and I'll look for the echo. The big factor, we had a big factor with Chris Roberts' letter for the chairman, where he kind of laid out what the plans were for 2025. And one of the major things that his plan had to do with stability, content, and narrative. It is Al. It's coming in through Al a little bit. I don't know why.
Okay.
Turn it down a little bit, maybe on your side, just the volume a little bit.
Yep.
So yeah, that is the main thrust, and because the narrative was put front and center by Chris during the letter for the chairman, I felt like it'd probably be a good idea to discuss a little bit about what Star Citizen narrative is, because unless you're someone like myself or Mats or Jail or Al, you probably didn't even know that Star Citizen had story or had like a narrative behind it. Or one of the wonderful folks who've been following lore, like plenty of us have. So I wanted to kind of lay out what lore has been inside the game of Star Citizen and where it might be going with the next year or so. So I'll kind of give a very, very brief overview of where we've been, and then we'll kind of discuss a little bit about if there's anything else you all want to add about where it is, because the main start of the story technically was Xenothreat, the Xenothreat event. That seems to be the main catalyst in the beginning. So the first invasion of Xenothreat to the Stanton system is the first real lore point we have in game. That's technically for CIG's point of view, but there is actually an earlier lore point in game, which is the Jumptown Wars, which was canonized after the fact. But that doesn't seem to have a huge impact. So, go ahead, Al.
We also had the raid on Vega 2.
Yes, that is
incorporated us into the story, and also the vote.
Al, you're muted for some reason. Somehow you just went muted.
Yeah, I was talking about the vote for the Imperator, which of course then translated into like posters in game and gave us an influence on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Al still appears to be talking, but we can't hear him.
Al.
I think he can't hear us either.
Okay.
No.
This is actually kind of funny.
I should have just tried to mime so that Al.
Okay, yeah, that's another one. Mats, do you know of any other events that kind of have brought forward in the lore that you can think of?
Well, not in the time frame that it would actually matter for the jump in for the new players when they enter the sentence system for the first time in this year.
And anything that's happened in the past that you can remember that was in game, not like an exterior thing.
I think they didn't they had a point on the Grimhex station for some takeovers from the pirate gangs and the exactly, and the harassment they did with the space stations, the assaults on
Yeah. So we also have the blockade stuff. Yeah, the original Ninetales lockdowns. Yeah.
I mean, they didn't work in game, but technically they were there.
Yeah, technically they existed. And I think the most recent one, the real start of the actual narrative of Star Citizen, for this year and for in general is the Save Stanton event. So like Save Stanton seems to be the first planned release of them going from no story in game to a story in game, with Overdrive being sort of the prequel to that, since it was sort of bringing back the Nine Tails event, so or the Xenothreat stuff. So we do have some light narrative, but most of it was introduced through exterior means. There's a lot of narrative in Star Citizen, but it's not in the game. I think Al's trying to reset real quickly, see if we can get it functioning. But specifically, the main story of Star Citizen seems to start with Save Stanton, which is why we have 2 chapters with it, which is interesting. That being said, where do you see the main thrust of the story of Star Citizen going forward? Just big wide sweeps from this Save Stanton event, where we had the Slicers coming into Stanton and attacking various locations, and now the Frontier Fighters and the Citizens for Prosperity are now in Pyro, causing trouble for the headhunters. Where do we see this going beyond this stage? I'll start with you, Mats.
Yeah, I probably think CG has now a really good chance to like introduce again like the mission givers that they tried earlier in Stanton from the corporations. Just because in the event of like going after the pirates and actually like securing the jump point itself. And I think like the foothold with the
Stanton Station.
Stanton, exactly, with the Stanton
Gateway.
Station.
Stanton Gateway, yeah.
That probably will, for the near future, will be like a main focus point, and then we get like some introductions of the smaller gangs that there with the local mission givers that they teased, and also like in CitizenCon, where I think they mentioned them. So I think probably in that direction, like not all, but in that direction.
More towards the mission giver styles, like the return to the mission givers. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Jail, where do you think the narrative is going to be pushing towards, just broad strokes, with 2025?
I'm not sure with 2025 as much as I think what we see in 2025 is going to build to what the narrative will be for 1.0, because I think that essentially the tech of the narrative, like running Xenothreat, if you wanted to swap it out for a Xi'an destroyer or something, and you could have a narrative around that. And my answer to that would be answering a fundamental gameplay narrative question for Star System 1.0. Why can we only go to 5 systems? I think that they're going to attempt to address that in a narrative sense. I think that the narrative justification for why players are isolated to 5 systems will be probably a Vandal invasion. And we'll see more of this sort of large-scale efforts of adversarial stuff over like capital ships, because they'll just eventually swap out like a Xenothreat Idris for a Vandal driller, or, and things like that. And so I think we'll start seeing more sort of prototype things where you could just swap it to Vandal and it would make sense. That's based on my kind of assumption of something that's going to be like the core spine to the 1.0
story,
main story. Yeah.
Okay. Al, can you hear us?
I can.
We can hear you.
Hey.
Cool. Excellent. We're back.
Oh, perfect.
Go ahead, Mats. You were going to say something, or no? Okay. So, Al, your thoughts on where the narrative, the general narrative drive, is going to happen in this next year in 2025?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with what Joe was saying. It makes sense to explain why we can't go beyond the 5 systems, and we've got the problems with law and order. But I think the Vandal threat from Odin and also the neighbouring systems being so close to that area does give a reason to lock down the systems and say, okay, it's for security. We are limited to where we can go. So I think that'll be one thing they do to explain that, to help people understand why we can't go to Sol or why we can't go to Crowshore, because they are big systems in the world. But I think they'll probably also start to develop, hopefully put more of that backstory into the things that are going on in the verse to help bring people who are new to the game up to some of those events. So, like the senatorial elections and things that helped us draw us into the events of the game. You'll remember, back in 2014, the news report that Vega had been attacked by the Vandal. That was huge for us. So it's those types of things that I think, or hope, that they will do to actually draw people into that lore and the story.
So I kind of am going to agree with that. Is I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation, but I also think that narratively speaking, we're going to see a lot of experimental narratives of the writers and the mission designers and those sorts of things really figuring out how they want to tell the story. So technically speaking, it's going to be like using different mission types, but I think we'll also see a variety of different ways of expressing the story. I think we'll probably see at least one full cutscene story narrative, like maybe event or something that's full integrated, like something like you'd see from Squadron, that they want to test to see if it works. I think we'll see maybe a lot of sort of just audio driven, where you have like maybe a little portrait of somebody and then the audio of them playing. And we'll almost certainly, at least early on, see a bunch of stuff that's just, here's the mission, bunch of text in the screen, here you go. I think that is where they are right now, is that sort of like read this mission flavor and just go, with hopefully the whole idea that there is going to be reputation gates. So you go do this mission for this group, you're going to be gated out of specific items or specific things or locations that you can't go to by doing those missions. And then hopefully, this is just my hope, that they'll slowly tier it up so that like we have mission givers, like when Matt said, like a return of the mission givers, where you may have some small narrative, but they talk to you through audio and update you on it here and there. Because the reality is that text-based missions would work well in 1995, but I don't think don't work well in 2025. Most people expect those audio and the video, especially for like immersion's sake. So,
well, if we look back to the two of the best missions we had early on, one was the Tessa Bannister series,
Yes.
which was just audio, but you'd fly to the fair station, and she'd give us missions to go off, and eventually you'd come across a Vandal raiding party. And then there was also the Ruin Kovalik Station mission, which I still think is one of the better missions. And depending on what you did, you could end up with different results. And that was always a great mission. But it showed the Kovalik's one showed the lack of security, the corruption that was in the system, showing the problems that are there as a result of it being sold off to 4 different corporations. And the Tessa Bannister one helped us get into the lore of not only the problems that people were facing out in the deep, but also the threat of the Vandal. So, but they were 2 great missions way back. So hopefully we'll see kind of a return to that type of thing as well.
And I really think when I talk about mission givers, I don't think like we will see like interactions with NPCs directly, but more over the Mobi-Glass and like this Tessa Bannister missions and
the chain
the
missions.
Clear Wanted. Exactly. And there was another one like a missing Starfarer.
Yeah, that was one of the early ones.
From
Yeah.
my family. Yeah. And I think we will see a lot more of these, but I think when we see them with the story behind, they will try like to keep focus on local stuff in Pyro, just because they don't then they don't have to retcon later on.
Especially if something is
big thing
big.
that
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like we talked about trying to explain why exactly we can't use jump points, and I think the Vandal invasion is a really good reason, but how they will like introduce that we still can like jump to Terra on that point. I think we will see that later when we see Nyx or even Kestra, because then we have those jump points, and at that point it would make sense to then elaborate, hey, that happened, because I don't think with only 2 systems now and like the foreseeable future, like I don't think we get the next star system like till the I don't give dates, like
Okay.
Not for a while.
not probably not this year. So I think they will keep also the lore missions or the lore stuff we actually get in game localized for Pyro, so they don't have to explain themselves. Later.
I mean, I don't think that they'll launch a narrative reason why we can't use jump points until 1.0, because it's that transition from this is a product in development to this is supposedly a complete product. And I do have 3 theories. Like, there's 3 theories that I could apply for why we're isolated to 5 systems if they want to give a narrative explanation. And I think they do want to give a narrative explanation, because they want to give a narrative explanation to why
Everything.
you respawn.
Yeah.
Everything, right. And the reason why I think the Vandal one is the most straightforward, the most obvious, is because you can do Battlestar Galactica vibes, it links to Squadron 42, you can foreshadow how it suddenly happens with what happens in Squadron 42. I do expect it to, if they go down that, it will be like, flash news, huge Vandal invasion that nobody expected.
Yeah. I can also see
one is
I could also see security reasons. Like you're locking it down because you don't have the proper authorization to go between these 2 systems, and like all the systems we're going to be in except for Terra are going to be absolutely massively criminal in some way, shape, or form. Well, Stanton is filled with criminals. I fully expect Castra to be filled with smugglers because of its location near Xi'an space. It's also right on the border with Xi'an space, so it may also be one of those like. Or I guess not anymore.
Hey, it could also be that, if you go, like, the jump points are there and you can go through them, and if you go through them, you just get murked by Vandal, and they've got like a really good quantum style, whatever.
Yeah.
The other one is, the other 2 are, Terra Sol Civil War, which, everyone's always anticipated, which will be interesting, but a big jump. And I think that we'd have to see a lot of narrative development to lead to that point. And then the third one, which I think is the least interesting, but is still foreshadowed, is failure of the jump point network, like Oratani style. I just don't think that there's not much narrative interesting things happening there, though. It's more sort of like, oh no, the world outside is fine, you're just in a bubble, and like as somebody's saying in the chat, jump points closed for resurfacing. So I think but I don't expect that to happen until 1.0 launches.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And I do think that 2025, Matt's is right on this one, is that we're going to see a much heavier emphasis on Pyro. The relationship between Pyro and Stanton is going to be the main focus of 2025 and probably even 2026. Because while Nyx, I'm a little more optimistic. I think we will get Nyx this year, but I don't think we'll get Nyx to the degree where we're going to be able to see a significant narrative push in the direction of Nyx, because they really want to flesh out and make a reason for you to go to Pyro, a reason for you to join with the Fire Rats or the Headhunters or the Horizon or whatever. They want you to do that, but they also don't want you to just be able to just do whatever you want. They want to kind of narrow the sandbox a little bit to tell these stories. So.
Yeah, now, Paulie, there's no way that Hurston's are supplying the citizens for prosperity and Pyro. We want to keep our business above board.
Uh-huh.
Those rumors of Hurston ships are arriving at their equals are just rumors. Just no proof to that.
There's
no
no
proof at all.
It just so happens that the leader of the Citizens for Prosperity is a former accountant for Hurston Dynamics. It just happens to be.
No, they're off the books. They're no longer employed by Hurston Dynamics. They will let it go for reasons I cannot go into.
I also
Pyro,
go ahead.
Pyro does become developing Pyro narratively does become the most important thing, because as soon as you have Castra and Nyx and Terra, anything that starts in Stanton and Terra and ends up in Nyx and Castra, or vice versa, involves Pyro through a transit, because that's how they've laid out the map. Unless they're changing the jump points and where they go, everything will always involve a transit through Pyro. And if that's a huge frustration, people won't want to do those missions. And if it's just a Euro truck simulator, put on your autopilot and point your ship right, it's not adding anything. So ensnaring, having interesting things to get ensnared in Pyro, even if you're just trying to pass through, is a gift that will keep on giving when it comes to narrative development.
To pick up a point you made a bit earlier, Jarl, about the Terra Sol Civil War. It was something I was actually thinking of as being another option they had for why we only have the 5 systems. And it could be that Terra has finally said, no, we're seceding. You're not doing the job of protecting the region properly. And the 5 systems are the 5 systems of the Terra breakaway. So, but that, again, it's one of those things that CIG would have to develop in terms of a story. There is quite a bit of a backstory in terms of that Terra movement for independence, and it even predates the Meza period, the Mezas, and they see themselves, and you don't like
terrorists.
Terra. I think they are all terrorists.
Yeah,
they are all terrorists. But there is an element where and one of the reasons I don't like them is when you read the lore, it's kind of everyone is equal, but we're more equal than everyone else.
Yeah.
So they're very Orwellian. They're very. I think the Hurstons would probably get on well with them.
I was going to say, would you say they're very Byzantine?
They're very Byzantine. Strange that. So as much as I don't like the way that Terrans come across. They are snotty. They are snobby, as Delano says. They are. If you look at the story that Star Citizen has in terms of its kind of concept and kind of overarching theme, which is the fall and decline of the Roman Empire as kind of its backdrop. So we're looking at the fall and decline of the UEE. Terra is Byzantium, and Earth is Rome, and you've got that player and that friction between them. And so, as much as I may hate Terra because of what it is, the reason the Romans established Byzantium was it had the ability to be right on the border where all the problems were. You could very easily get your armies to all the trouble spots, and that's what Terra gives, to be able to get the fleets to those trouble spots really quickly. Whereas, so yeah.
That's you gonna say something?
Yeah, I want to actually hook into that theme, because we heard in the past a lot more about the Terra and Earth dispute, let's say, but we never heard the military side of it. What's actually happening. We have the Castra system now in the 1.0 future, where they say, yeah, that's still an active military base. And then that's the question about will Terra also split or try to split from the UEE with let's say with an amount of the UEE Navy forces.
Yeah.
And is that maybe part of a strategy to keep out the Vandal on the rest of the UEE space in a whole. Like if they create like this safe zone we are stuck in, that they can like, or that they think they can contain the Vandal evasions into UE space better when like Terra tries to split itself up, and then they can like shove all the problems onto them. But I also think like that would be pretty limiting for the future for in-game reasons, because when the Earth and Terra split and the Vandal occasions are like really that big of a focus like they showed us, I can think, or I assume that they will also like lock us for the first login to Terra to get us on board with the situation, and then just said like, okay, now you can explore the story or the other systems, and then let us go. So
in a way, that the point I made about like the developments we see now will be the gameplay prototypes for these big events, right? One of the points in favor of the idea of the Solterra and Civil War being like the main story is any event where you can pick a side, because I don't imagine that they're going to have anything where we could pick a side with the Vandal. Like,
Yeah.
that would just be a bit
No.
narratively weird.
No.
So I kind of, as we see things develop, I think if you see a event where they've thought up some essentially, a generic faction of baddies, and they're ontologically evil, go and kill them. You can't take their side. I'm mentally thinking they're preparing for events where they'll swap that out for Vandal.
Mhm.
Whereas if you see something where it's pick a side and choose which side you want to back. I mean, that could stay as just gang warfare, but it could also be something that they then swap out for this sort of factionalism gameplay later.
Yeah.
I
agree. I think like Xenothreat, for instance, is going to go away before 1.0 hits, just because the CIG wants to make them the ontologically evil faction of Pyro. They're the ones that nobody likes, nobody in Pyro likes, nobody in the UEE likes. So they're just sort of like the punching bags of the story so far. So I can definitely see them going away, because unless CIG wants to actually incorporate the reputation system within Xenothreat and have players play with them, but they don't seem to want to do that. So I can definitely see that. So,
Nolan or Maria,
but also
no,
like
Al is not broken.
Yeah, but also like what I would question is if we could already choose like a side in 1.0, because of the limited space we have. Like, I don't know if any of the systems would like qualify as a UEE stronghold, so you can like, if you pick the UEE side for Earth.
Yes.
For the centralists.
I mean, you're right, because I think the one thing to point out, or just to kind of jump onto that real quick, is that like Stanton is the median point. It's seen as like the median point between the eastern and the west. So like Stanton is probably the furthest west eastern province, I guess you could say, of the Empire. So, but yeah, it's very much more Terra focused than Earth focused. So,
yeah. So I think they will like the gameplay we will see. They will try to get those like how to choose a faction, but I think that will actually like come later, like in 1.x patches, when we have like actually Terran own space, like Terran loyalist space. And I think they will like try to divert like our attention first with Pyro and the gangs, and test the faction stuff itself for political factions. Later we will get with the whole other more lawful systems. We will get more like brands, more corporations where we get to side with. and then they will like use the Vandal just as a punching bag. Like I think they will introduce Nyx as like these, hey, you can go there and do PvE without thinking about who you will piss off or not. Like just to give people like this space of where they can go savage and uh, do their fleet battles, and like there are only like 2 planets and the asteroid belt, and they have a lot of space and they can't go crazy in the systems, so they get the time to develop the rest of it.
I could see the Vandal not just being used as a punching bag, but the tool that's used to take the heat off. So you got say the Terran Soul War heating up. It's getting rather savage, and you want to reset it. You bring the Vandal in, the common enemy of all humanity. So everyone turns to attack and deal with that threat, and then it calms down again. So
let's kind of move this over towards that question as well, because I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about 2025 and the movement towards 1.0. I'll start with you on this one, Al. Do you think the story that they're going to start to introduce in 2025, things like Save Stanton and moving forward, other missions that they are planning on doing, do you think this will feed into the actual main story of 1.0? Is this all heading towards that main story? Or are we just still going to see a lot more? Is this just sort of like the experimental phase still, where they're sort of figuring out how they want to make these missions, how they want to introduce story and plots into the game?
I think it'll be a mix. Like if you look at the way we've got the factions in Pyro at the moment, they are choose a side. You pick the Citizens for Prosperity or the Citizens for Progress. Like I think it's Citizens for Progress is actually the name, but I keep calling it Citizens for Prosperity because it's
No, they're Citizens for Prosperity.
Influence.
They used to be Citizens for Pyro, and now they're Citizens for Prosperity. So,
yeah. So a very very Hearthstonian name, I think.
Yeah.
So. But if you pick that faction, you kind of lock yourself out of the other factions, and so that's kind of going forward. I can see that being the things that will influence gameplay and influence the choices we make. So choices are going to matter, and it's going to pick up that idea that CIG has always said choices matter. But that's also going to help them feed out the story of what's going on in Pyro and help us understand the whole situation. I think the fact that the Citizens for Prosperity have that very Hurston link ties in that story with helping us understand the relationship and why Hurston or why Stanton want to influence Pyro and why they want to take the heat off. Stop the brigands coming in from over the wall and basically hold them at that point. So those types of things will help us just stay in the game. But it's also I think they also want to move to that point where they're bringing the newer players, those people who haven't been here since 2013 or 2014 or 2012, and following the law and weren't involved in a news flash for the siege of Vega or voted for our Tavaran senator. Those people need to be brought up to speed in terms of law to enrich them, and I think hopefully that's kind of the avenue they'll kind of start to develop. So I think we'll see Pyro being an experimental bed, but also as they develop that battle beat, slowly get expanded as we move out. I hope.
All right. I'm trying to still process that. I think I get what you're saying. I think I know what you're saying. But Jael, your thoughts? Do you think that what we're going to see now is still more experimental storytelling in terms of CIG figuring out how they want to tell the story that they're telling through the missions, or do you think that they're starting to build the narrative that they want to release with 1.0?
I think they still need to do development on the underlying gameplay that they attach story hooks to. You can make a fetch quest and go, okay, what's the story behind why we need that object and who's got it? You can do a kill quest. Who are those people? Why do they deserve to die? Why was my motivation for wanting them dead? But we need to get, I think there's still levels of complexity that are needed for the gameplay, which is then a sort of sort of a cyclical thing of what gameplay loops are needed to for narrative hooks, and what narrative hooks can be then serviced by those gameplay options. We've seen a lot on Star Citizen 1.0 having non-combat factions being part of the main story. They said that the main story will introduce you to all these factions. You'll do some missions for all of them, and you'll be able to invest your time to go deeper into them. So I think we'll start to see more narrative gameplay, new gameplay and new narrative around hooks that will be developing towards those aims as well. Not just, collecting the boxes for your existing events, but stuff that it adds more complexity onto that, I'd say. So I would expect to see that being the focus, even if it's not maybe completed this year, but I think we'll see more discussion about it.
Okay. Same question.
Yeah, I would agree with what Jail said. I think we will see narrative stories in the sense of that the quests we do will have follow-up missions, but they will tell local stories, contained stories that have a start and a finish, and you can play through them in an evening, and more things that will tell you about what's the current situation like. What's the feeling like Pyros should give you when you go there, when you speak with the citizens of Prosperity, in what situations are they currently in, but nothing grand structure basic like a red line where you can follow and say, oh yeah, back in the days when CIG was still in the with Star Citizen in the 2.x phase, you can now connect things they planned back then with things they plan for the next year or so. I think that will come later. And yeah, and I think we will get a few more retcons. I know people don't like them, but I think as the tech and the gameplay will develop, a lot of stuff they're even planning now will get rewritten to be adjustable for the 1.0 kind of gameplay we will have then in the future. So
yeah, I can see that. Definitely, retcons are a matter of fact. If any story that's in development is going to have retcons. I don't think we're going to see major retcons. Like the UEE isn't suddenly going to be renamed like the Galactic Federation or something like that. It's but I do think we're going to see some of the details of planets and maybe some of the other maybe some factions getting worked around a little bit more, so that they can either be fluffed up or be split up into different things.
That's one of the things
also,
Dave Haddock.
Go ahead.
That's one of the things Dave Haddock said in the past, isn't it? The law team, they'll write the law, but they try not to go into the minutiae because they want to give the broad outline. They don't want to paint the whole canvas because there's got to be stuff for us to discover. There's got to be stuff for the developers to be able to be free to create. Because if you paint every detail and then you say to the developer, you've got to build this ship, or you've got to build this aspect, and you've got every aspect of it kind of detailed out already, you limit their creativity, and so you want to open that up so they can create, but you also want the framework that they can work within. So
also they learned quite a long time ago that the only thing worse than a gap in knowledge is something that is going to be overwritten. And something that was written on a page 10 years ago will not be a barrier to someone having a better idea when they actually get to developing it. Like Pyro, according to the star map, was 10 times the size of Stanton. Everyone kept saying, oh, think how the ships are going to get around when it's 10 times as big, and it's not going to be 10 times as big.
Yeah.
And it isn't.
Yeah,
because
it's
they just changed that number.
slowly maneuvered it down so it's like only two or three times the
Yeah.
size of Stanton. Still big, but
But on the other hand, when we introduced Castra and they started talking about the architectural style that they were developing for Castra, and they were referencing a document that was written in 2014 about architectural styles of the Empire. Like that was part of the level designers things. It was like, oh yeah, this is Henoism or whatever it is, the
it's Henoism.
ultra brutal. Yeah, Henoism. And it's like, that was from 10 for the Chairman in 2014.
Yeah.
So they are going back to that pool of work to fish it for good things.
Mm.
They are sometimes like I still think one of the biggest sorts of bad change law wise was insisting on regeneration, respawning being worked in, because frankly, death has ended. Why is anyone talking about anything other than the end of death and the conquering of death?
But
why
it,
why is Xenothreat thinking about anything other than like, hang on, we're now an immortal species. We need to realign all our values around this fundamental change.
but Joe, that's not what the regeneration does. Regeneration just explains death of the spaceman. We still are going to have a limited number of respawns, even the way we've talked about it.
Narrative-wise, but narrative-wise, regeneration didn't exist. It didn't exist in the world, and then it was invented, and we're living through the rollout of that technology.
Because in the narrative sense of what they wanted was the number of near-death experiences. But how do you have a near-death experience in space and then still be able to come back? So the regeneration is a way to explain that going on. And actually have even
what
said...
What Jail's saying is like, how does that affect a society? When you go from, like, if we today had regeneration in our life right now, it would fundamentally alter religion, let alone like how we view the world and how we view ourselves, because suddenly that doesn't matter anymore. It does matter in the long sense that eventually we'll have the big death, but like when death is no longer a threat, how does that change?
Okay, so
people's
when you're a cat with 9 lives,
that's why it's so toxic to the idea of it as a narrative, because they didn't need to explain it. They didn't need deciding that they needed to explain it meant that they introduced such an atomic bomb under everything that everyone's values, everyone's factions, every political thing would be changing to talk about this in the same way that the outbreak of World War One changed Europe. It's kind of the only thing.
Yeah.
So
but I mean, like, our relationship with death, I know chat's saying it's like it's not immortality. It's not immortality, but our relationship with death would change. And if you look at history and how history like talks us about deal with things, like look at the Black Death. Death became so common during the plague eras that people became entirely desensitized to it. It's why we have so many like depictions of skeletons and skeletal figures in medieval art, because it was just like death was common. Death was everywhere. And it was in everybody's face. Rather than being something that would happen naturally at the end of life or through an accident, it was just like random and pointless. People just died. And that changed how Europe viewed life and death. It changed how people in Europe saw life in many, many ways. And World War One is another example where a relationship with death became different, because like an entire artistic movement came around about how, like, what is the point of life? And so, like, what Jail's trying to say is that narratively speaking, this has completely changed humanity. We wouldn't be necessarily always be like, okay, well, we got to take care of Ninetales or got to take care of Xenothreat. It would be like, why? Why do we care? Like, well, why would Xenothreat care as much when they could just do these things? And there would be also political aspects to it. So I get the point. I think it's still a clever story for what they're doing for, as long as they really lean into that. But I get what the complaint what Jail's saying.
I don't think they're leaning into it.
No.
Well, I have leaned into it a little bit in terms of we have seen there's been discussion, at least law-wise, story of what does it mean for life. The purists who I haven't been regenerated yet. So there are factions who say, no, I'm not getting regenerated because it's not me. It's a fake. That type of thing. We've also had the news that there are problems with the regen tech. We haven't heard what those problems are yet, but that has been teased in some of the law releases we've seen that there's some form of problems with that regen text. So what it is, we don't know yet, but there is something not quite right. So I think they are leaning into that or trying to use that. But I think the idea of it was to explain what that outlined Death of the Spaceman was going to be, and so it's not necessarily
Well,
immortality, but it is.
There was an explanation for what Death of the Spaceman was, which was just you got rescued. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a good one. Yeah. Yes, they did put some lore articles out at the time, but they kind of haven't since to a great
Yeah.
degree. It was all around the same release, and it was just this example of they had a gameplay decision, about how it worked and so forth, that was sort of they didn't seem to have like weighed up in any way. It was entirely gameplay over
Story.
narrative, but then insisting that the narrative needed to change to accommodate the gameplay. Like as I say, I don't think that the gameplay should have changed. I just don't think it needed explaining. I don't think it needs explaining any more than logging off or loss of connection. I don't need loss of connection, a 30k error, to have an in-game explanation where it's like, oh, it's brain problems relating to Moby class overuse.
Yeah.
It.
I get it. I understand it.
Yeah, but
Go ahead, Bats.
to get also like where we came from this discussion, like I call it the pot Olisa treatment.
Okay.
Like there are stuff in the lore that get changed for gameplay and then get forgotten. Like it just like we have like we said with the regenerative technology. Like first off, it doesn't work always. Second, we don't know how it works. Like in game, the technicians don't know why it works, and yeah,
And
and
it's
all
Vandal.
the political and religious and all the law content stuff that would imply such a change in the culture, like it got the same treatment as Port Olisar. It
Yeah.
existed, it changed.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
Did something happen to it? We don't know. It exists somewhere in the timeline, and then it gets dropped, and no one's talking about it. So they hope no one asks these questions, but they keep it open. So if they maybe come back later to it, they have something to pick up on. And I think we will. That's something what I think we will see more often in the near future with the new star systems and the new gameplay opportunities. We will see more localized gameplay, narrative stuff, but also stuff that like a lot of people like will exist, cool stories, and they just vanish in the grand scheme of what happens in Star Citizen. Like and even early, like the Tressa gameplay stuff or the Benny Henge. Like you can still find it and or find someone that knows about it, but stuff they will like create, think, oh yeah, that's great, and then drop and forget about it. Maybe pick it up later, but not certainly.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, where's Tessa type question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But only like a quarter of the community even remembers Tessa because the community has grown so much since those 2.0 days. So I personally think what we're going to be seeing this year is going to be less of an exploration of 1.0 storyline and more of the thing that they were hinted at CitizenCon, which was that the local stories. Because they want to do like the 1.0 main story, and then they also wanted to have each system to have its own system stories, and then inside of those systems, each organization stories, stuff like that. I think that's what we're going to see with Pyro is an experimentation into how to tell a story about a system. My hope is that it includes things like faction warfare and faction transfer of locations. So like if players work really hard, then they might lead to an event where a outpost is being invaded by one of the factions, and then you can either defend it or attack it, and then whoever wins that battle, that faction takes it over, and so it's sort of like the power play aspect of Elite, how that they did in Elite, something like that, or the Star Citizen's sort of spin on that. That's my hope of where they're going with it, but not necessarily true. So
a bit like a dynamic universe or dynamic system where bases or systems are changing. Very much Dark Age of Camelot in terms of a realm versus realm region. Very much like Starfleet battles and their dynamic universe.
There was a New World has a similar thing with the forts. So yeah.
Guild Wars 2 with its forts.
Yeah.
In the realm versus realm system. So I could see that being where they go. Because it's been a common thing in quite a few games, whether it's been the tabletop-y type games, whether it's been like Starfleet battles, or whether it's other games like Dark Age of Camelot, Elite, Guild Wars 2. So, and we know from early on, Chris was leveraging into those types of games, Guild Wars 2, Dark Age of Camelot,
Yeah.
So,
here's a question though. Right, here's a nasty question. Will the story, let's say the story of Pyro involves unseating Xenothreat from Ruin Station and someone else taking over. Is that a story that we collectively play out once and it can be replayed out and everybody experiences the idea that now, it's not Xenothreat anymore, it's this other faction, they take it over, so everyone goes to Ruin Station and they find a different faction in control? Or is this going to be a little bit more instanced? And when a player experiences Pyro for the first time, they're experiencing a Pyro that is under the thumb of Xenothreat, and they encounter Xenothreat, and then you play through the story with you and your friends, and it ends with a raid on Ruin, and then you essentially are unlocking the liberated Ruin Station that other players have already been visiting. Is that which design are they going to go for? I think both could be fun, but they reflect very different ethoses.
Yes.
I got the impression from early on that Chris was going down the line, or liked the way that Guild Wars 2 went with their bosses and the instanced events, where the boss turns up and everyone who's in the server can converge on that boss and help defeat it. Rather than that instance, everyone does that job. And then, I do a job, and then 2 weeks later you do the same job, and I walk past and I see you doing that, talking to the guy, and I hear the chat from my thing, and I go, yeah, it's a repeat. I don't think they want to go down that line, but I can see that opens it up for everyone. But I could see them also just doing these missions where it kind of, there's an event, everyone's going to be involved, someone's in control for a while, but we've also got, we're only 10% of the population, and so they use that 90% of NPCs to reset to where they want it to be. So, yes, we boot Xenothreat out, and Xenothreat come back and push everyone out again. And
yeah. I mean, you also have the problem of people being, that feeling cheap. That will feel cheap, because like the players did all this work, and they did this event, and they kicked out Xenothreat, and now somehow Palpatine returned. That story, like that's just sort of like oh, so the bad guy's back somehow, and we have no narrative reason for it, or it's a loose narrative reason. Yeah. So I can see that also being a problem. I see what Jail's getting at, and I do wonder if that's the case, of where people are going to be at different stages of the story, and different stages of the story will lock you out of certain events until you complete other stages, and then you can play with your friends. I think CIG is not going to do that, only because that removes a lot of players playing together. And so much of what CIG's design language for the game has been is 3 to 4 players playing together, but also like with the PvP stuff, like the larger aspects of like base building and larger organizations, that sort of end game content they want to get to. I don't think CIG wants to lock out the end game for somebody who hasn't played the main story, because they don't want people to just be forced to play the main story or a local story to be able to experience the full content that's in that area. Though I do think that they still will use instancing, because they've already said they want to do instancing with the Vandal raids, I could easily see them do instancing as a for things like the takeover of Ruin Station. But there's a lot of work they're putting into, like, say, like Xenothreat, for them to just be gone one day, and it's like, okay, cool, all this asset, all this work is now gone. We're done. We're not going to see them anymore as a threat. So there's definitely going to be a balance of economical use of what they already have, assets they've already created, and also telling an interesting story that's a fine line they're going to have to balance. Go ahead, Matt.
Um, yeah, what I think they should try, or better, what I think they will try is like a Helldiver 2 kind of approach. Like we will get missions to help factions. Then there will pop instances where we get the big fights against stations, fleets, and stuff. And in the background, there will like a percentage meter that goes up. And if in a certain point of time, if a certain threshold of that percentage is like triggered, then it will change globally for everyone. Like a specific faction will then get a lead, a heads up, and then like the missions for them or against them will like multiply in some sort of manner, so they can like simulate, yeah, everyone's doing the missions that they want, and they get a pull out of it where like the player's interest lies the most, like which missions for which factions are done the most, and then they can like gradually change the state of the player environment in the universe for everyone, so no one gets like this feeling, oh, I grinded for this faction like for a month with my friends, and we like managed to get a hold of the whole planet or whatever, and then certainly it changes. But like they will gradually, like in Helldiver, you go
Line go up.
like
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
There's a planet, there's a percentage time. If you win, the percentage goes up. If you lose, the percentage goes down. A little bit more complicated with all affection, but I think in the background they will resort to something like that.
I could see something like that. Instance content specifically for faction conflict. I could see that. Yeah. Jill?
I think to sort of bring it back round to answer my own question from the top again, I suppose, is as I've said, I think that the content that they develop now is showing prototypes that they're going to carry forward. And all of these big events have always been server-wide. There's never been this sort of instant stuff. They have talked about, instance battle zones under Arc Corp for things and so forth. But, I mean, if the main story is something that... The problem I have, I suppose, is that if you're going through the main story, you're going to have people at different stages of the main story. And if it doesn't have impacts on the world around you, then you're not going to feel meaningful.
Yeah.
So it's that tension. So I wonder if they will, to some extent, use a trick of players at different stages of the main story experience the world slightly differently, like and to some extent that being instancing. I do think that for Xenothreat, it will be a server-wide, universe-wide thing, that one day we kill Xenothreat and it's replaced with another gang, and then it maybe devolves into, or not devolves, but it evolves into a king of the hill between the remaining gangs. I feel like probably, as you say, it would be bad if Palpatine somehow has returned and Xenothreat come back, but I can see it turning into a rotating carousel of the Fire Rats and
for sure
all these other groups, using the same mechanics.
If we boot Xenothreat out, does it mean they're wiped out, or does it just mean they're retreated?
They're retreated, yeah.
So one of the questions we've raised in the past is, are Xenothreat really the Mezzas? Is it Fiona Mezza coming back? Is it she behind the scenes?
And how much do these factions play into 1.0 is another question too, because like Xenothreat could be a very important faction for the 1.0 story. Same with like I have a feeling that they might be them and Citizen or That's Prosperity, but the People's Alliance. I could see these factions becoming major plot points in the in the 1.0 story, so they can't go away if a player comes in 2 years after 1.0 story is released and needs to play that story. Then those factions have to be there and be in those locations in order for them to continue to tell that story. So
I could see a reason. Go on.
The big question with the coherency of the storyline is also like a technical question for some part, because we hear CIG again and again talking about how they would want to that we get more controls over the shards we play in, and how they want to develop that. And I'm still one of the believers that they will get to the point where they get one mega shard for everyone. I hope. I'm still one of those people. But even if they are localized, then will they hold on to the thought that they will synchronize the main story for everyone, or will every time zone create an own narrative over time, how it will develop? That's also the technical question behind how they will do and prepare missions for not only the whole game, but also in that local system part, which faction wins and gets a hand over the other and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good question, that one. I will add one more thing, Al, because I just realized something. Yep. I think I know how CIG is going to do the instance main mission stuff, because as you were explaining, how do you deal with people? You don't want people to be doing the same thing. I think what CIG is going to do is they're going to create main instanced missions for players just starting the campaign, just starting the main story. And then a lot of the storyline missions are going to be randomized missions, just sort of regular missions that they kind of tie some narrative in, like, hey, my contact needs some help over here, go do this sort of thing. But they're going to be major beats, which will be instanced, where unless you have that mission, you cannot do it. Other players may be able to join you and replay those missions, but those stories are unique to the players who have that instance. No one else can walk into them. They're locked down for that whole point of view, and then move forward. But that would also mean that everyone is the main hero, which I don't like. I hate that narrative with MMOs where everyone is the savior for some reason, but you still want to tell a story. So that's the difficult part that I can see coming in there. Sorry, go ahead, Al.
Just got to remember the train of thought I had. It's okay. But I could see that being a way you deal with it, so everyone is the hero, and yet it's one of the things I always hate. I defeated the
Lich King,
Darth Maul, and I defeated the Witch King. I defeated Darth Maul. I defeated. Oh, so did I.
Yeah, so did everybody. Yeah.
It kind of lessens that. Whereas that was one of the things I really did like about Guild Wars, Guild Wars 2. The main boss had spawned. Everyone could go there.
Mm.
The problem with that is I'd spawn the main boss. Everyone would go there. A day later, you'd spawn the main boss. Everyone.
Yeah.
And so it was still that same type of problem. One of the things I was thinking of it in terms of Xenothreat is one of the reasons, as much as everyone hates Xenothreat, one of the reasons why Xenothreat is still there and still valuable is they've got the big fleet that actually helps keep the Vandal at bay. So they may be our enemy, we may hate them, but I don't want them to go away because the UEE's not here. Mm-hmm. They're the guys who are keeping the evil Vandal away. So there are other ways you can look at it, but yeah, I was just thought that could be an interesting way as to why we don't want the Vandal to get, not the Vandal, the new Meza regime to be completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
and I think Xenothreat are going to be destroyed. I think they're going to be destroyed before 1.0. I think they're going to be killed as part of the alpha beta experience in Pyro. And my reason for that would be that they are actually really underdeveloped. Mm-hmm. That even if you look at the other sides of the same story, the CDF, We got loads of lore about the CDF, how they, relate to the Bremen Defense Force and Rainer Dooley and stuff. We don't know who founded Xenothreat. We don't know where they get their ships from.
Yeah.
They, I mean, for heck's sake, I mean, like the moon Magda of Hurston. I can tell you that Magda went to Geneva Business School.
Yeah.
That's their style of lore when they care about something that's going to be, and the fact that
long term
Xenothreat, the fact that Xenothreat have no long term development makes me think that they're going to allow us to permanently kill them, and then there will be something else that fills the gap. And I don't think it's just going to be, Xenothreat becoming Winothreat and becoming Xenothreat becoming a it's not going to be carbon copy. I think they're a really boring faction, to be honest. I think that there's so like the work they've done on the Pyro gangs gives them so many more colors to paint with than Xenothreat, which was
it's a result of 2015. Like Xenothreat was a 2015 creation, and as I've said many times, 2015 Star Citizen, especially with the writing, was very paint by numbers, big, bold. These are the big ideas. And so Xenothreat was obviously something, I don't know who came up with it. It may have been just like, I know a lot of the lore is just Ben spitting stuff out. And so they just went with it. So it may have been something like Ben thought it was a funny pun to say they hate aliens and they're called Xenothreat. Like, so, but yeah, they are very much a underdeveloped. Like, because I can tell you the entire lore of the Xenothreat right now, their leader is called the Commander. And they're made up of a lot of ex-UEE military, and they showed up in 2946. Like, Ninetales has more lore than Xenothreat, and they don't have a lot of lore.
When you look at the lore for Xenothreat, I think the stuff that their Mezzas, their Fiona Mezzas coming back.
Yeah,
most of that stuff has been. You, Jail, and I speculating
us talking about
as to who Xenothreat are.
Yeah.
So we've probably done more development of Xenothreat's backstory than CIG have, and does feed to Jail's thing that they're not there for longevity; they're there to fill a gap.
I will also the one counterpoint I'll have is there's a saying that I've heard spoken of by video game content or for video game writers, which is you want to leave a mystery. You don't want to answer every question, because leaving a mystery means people will talk about it. When you answer every question, then they no longer talk about it. It's done. They've completed it.
Mm-hmm. I've heard Dave say the same thing.
Yeah.
Dave Haddock has said exactly the same thing. You want to leave the breadcrumbs.
We've also seen Dave write better mysteries.
Yes.
Yes. The mystery. There are plenty of mysteries in Star Citizen, and they're kind of better written than
Xenothreat.
It really is kind of like those 3 points that they're at Ruin Station. He's called the commander. They've turned up in here. Even the idea that they're UEE military, is that even stated, or is that just us interpreting it from the fact that they wear UEE military gear?
It's a data leak. That's all I'll say. It's at least at one point they had Dooley say more lines than she did in the original Xenothreat, and one of those lines was her mentioning that they're made up of mostly UEE military and complaining about it because she herself was also UEE military, and she's like, yeah, shit's bad, but it wasn't that bad. Like, what are you gonna do? Just go to little Pyro and scrape moss off of walls so you can survive. That's you got to be in some bad stuff for that sort of that. So. Like that's, and that may also change because it was a line that was in a unused line for that never came out public. So
I mean, did they cut that because they were letting on too much about a mystery they want to develop, or did they cut that because it's like it's not worth pissing off the people who will feel therefore more more common cause with them, or muddying the waters more? We just want these people to be shot. Because it's fun to shoot them.
They're bad guys.
You got that sense with the Xenothreat in the audio as well, where the guy would, you'd blow up a ship and the guy would say, we'll be back because you just killed guys I served with. I knew those guys. So you do have that sense that even without them saying these guys are military, you get the sense that they are military.
No.
All right. I think we'll wrap this up with one big question, which is for people who love stories and loves video game stories, do you believe that 2025 has a lot of potential for CIG to come out and actually like cater to those interests? So people who want to play stories, play video games with, you know, deep lore and narrative and characters. Do you think 2025 is that sort of year where this is sort of going to become a thing that CIG does, or is this more still of a experimental year where there's trying to figure things out, trying to see what works and what doesn't? So, like, should people be looking forward to a year where their niche or their what they like in video games is being catered to, or is this more of this is CIG's focus because it's where they want to go long term rather than short term? Al, I'll start with you with that one.
I would like to think it's them going long term, but I'm not sure they're in a position to do that in terms of they can tell the story for Pyro to a certain degree, but then once they tell the story and set that in stone, then that kind of may limit where they go in their other stories, the other systems. And so I can see problems, but I also know that they want to have more narrative and have more of those links and loops and hooks that draw us in and keep us engaged with what's going on, and use that to help tell the story of what's going on. So I am tentatively living in hope.
Okay. Jail?
In my experience, gamers feel like their lore interests are being catered for when they play something and they get the sense that they're getting a little bit more out of it because of something that they read or they remembered from a past scene, a past product, a lore article, a book that they didn't have to read, something like that, that they got some insight that other people aren't getting. And some properties are completely dependent on that. If you're watching The Rings of Power and you don't know who Elendil and Galadriel are in the other things, you're just seeing what's on the screen, you are watching a different show to somebody who can tell you the entire lineage of all the elves and whatever. I think that CIG is probably still in the experimental phase. I think that we're not going to be at that point where people are going to feel like they're getting a lot more out of it from having read lore, because we haven't, like, okay, so maybe we'll see Galactopedia going actually in the app properly and people using it and finding more, but really there's not a lot of representation of that content in things in the game yet. Maybe they'll start developing that, but I think that their focus will be more on supporting new gameplay loops that are fundamental for building towards the long-term games of 1.0.
Okay. Mats, same question for you.
I would say yes and no. For like the reason, I think for the people that like get into Star Citizen casually and just play it for fun, they will get more the opportunity to learn about the gangs in Pyro or Stanton, because they're trying to give us missions where they get a bit involved with the lore. And so for people that also like are very interested in the lore, that will be a nice hunt for all the clues. But if you are someone that likes that you like Star Citizen and you know a bit of the lore, but want to have a narrative experience where it's like a story they tell, like a real story, I think it's not the year yet. I think it will come a little bit later.
To wrap this up, I think I'm gonna echo what you said, Matt. I think what all of us said. I would love to see it. I don't think we're gonna see it, but I do think that if you've been waiting for something like more lore to matter, to actually like sit there and go, oh, I care about this gang now, I think this is the year where that starts to happen, where people start to realize there is a universe beyond like getting in your ship and flying around. But I don't think this is the year we're going to get well crafted characters that you can attach yourself to, or narratives that you can follow, and that people can that people can break down in videos for people who don't want to play the whole thing or anything like that. I don't think that's the case. I do think it is more going to be world building with the lore, and I think they have a lot of work to do because they really haven't done that beyond the website. So, and I think that's really going to be the focus this year, is to, alongside the fundamental world building of building out reputation systems and mission systems and everything they need to do to flesh out what they have currently, you're also going to see the narrative team and the mission design teams starting to put all this stuff together to create the foundation for those stories to be told. But we're not going to see those stories told for a little while, but maybe not even until 1.0. But
and those stories that we're telling in Pyro, I'd like to see them also do the same thing in Hurston, where you get not Hurston, in Stanton, where you get the different companies being fleshed out more. Yeah. I want to know more about why we're finding those old medals, in the Tavaran war medals and other bits and pieces in Stanton. I want to hear the story of those. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, we can dig down and find them, but I want to hear that story in game.
Yeah.
They're the types of things I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's like a we didn't even mention this, and we'll probably bring it up in the question and answers, but like there's been an entire mission type that they've been developing for like 3 to 4 years now, which they've updated every so often, which is the investigation missions. They've been talking about doing investigation missions for since like 2020, for like 5 years. But we've got a few updates and snippets here and there, but we've never seen them go full bore on what those missions are going to be, or even putting in experimental versions in the pack, the stuff. Which, in theory, if you're looking at investigations, that should involve reading, observation, and so it should involve some world building as part of that mission design. But we've not seen any of that. So possibly this is the year for that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching so far. Make sure you check out the Info Runners. Make sure you check out Jail's channel on YouTube. And Matt's YouTube. All of those are linked in the description below. And if you did enjoy this, make sure you join us live at twitch.tv/TheAstroPub and youtube.com/TheAstroPub live on Saturdays starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. We'd love to have you come on and join us live. We're going to be heading into the question and answer session, the After Dark session, and those where chat's going to ask questions. We'll do our best to answer them. If you did enjoy this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe on YouTube for more content, and hit the bell icon to be notified when these release. Especially if you're watching this on the recorded YouTube afterwards, make sure you subscribe to the Captain's Table podcast, so that that's where all these are going to live in the future. And of course, subscribe to us on Spotify and leave us a rating, leave us a comment. Those all to help push us up in the algorithm a little bit more, to help more people discover this, and hopefully a little bit less bandwidth intensive for those of you who are listening to this in the car or at work or anything else like that. Thank you for watching, and like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black. All right, chat, we'll be right back. We're going to use the restrooms, get something to drink, that kind of thing. If you want to ask questions, make sure you use the brackets question. This down a little bit. Make sure you use the brackets and question in your question so that it'll get picked up by the bot, and we'll pull you from there. And we're back with the question and answer session, the Captain's Table After Dark, where we take questions from the chat here. This is the question and answer session with Algrid, Jail, and Mats, where we talked a bit about the Star Citizen's story in 2025, the narrative, the lore, where is it going to go, what kind of stories are going to look like, and a little bit about 1.0 and where the story is going to look like in the final version, first release version of Star Citizen. But we've got a bunch of questions that were asked by the chat, so we're going to get started right away with Del Ener, who asks, is all audio or video missions an expected experience for an MMO in 2025? The only one I know is the Old Republic. How many missions should be voiced and or have audio? If I remember correctly, ESO has audio as well. There's a couple of more modern MMOs that do have audio and maybe not video, maybe not cutscenes and that kind of stuff. But I know Final Fantasy 16 has full-blown cutscenes with its MMO as well. So, modern MMOs have a lot more narrative flair inside of them if they are narrative MMOs. What do you all think?
I think that you can achieve a really nice level of verisimilitude by having everything. You know, having a cutscene and then some text communication with the same character and another cutscene later. Because that's how you interact with real people. You know, we're talking on the fully voiced animated version right now.
Yeah.
You know, us four, where previously we were on a text chat and we existed in each other's worlds.
Yeah.
So, but I would really dislike if everything is voiced, because I think that actually puts a huge constraint on things, and it can be really bad for the narrative. For example, the change between the Elder Scrolls Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls Oblivion was when they went from it being fully text-based to everything really having to be voice-acted, and the amount of content and the quality of content was hugely reduced as a result. So I think that they really that they should use they'll obviously use their capacity and their budget for animation to its fullest extent. They should use that as punctuation rather than being like, every time you're on a main story, it's fully acted, and the further you get away from the main story into kind of grindy things, the less fun it is, essentially, the less engaging it is.
If we're talking about that, I would definitely say that what you're saying is probably perfect. And a lot of the ideas, the way that I've always seen CIG, or at least I think CIG was going with it, is that you would have, like, even with mission givers, you would have go meet the mission giver in person, talk to them, get to know them, and then they would send you off to do a mission. And from then on, they'd give you text missions, maybe an occasional call, say, hey, do this for me. But it's going to be very vague and more like inserting any of the missions they've already created for other locations just into like, oh, go do a kill mission, go do a transport mission, whatever, where they don't have to be like handcrafted missions for these groups, but like a hopper of missions that you can be pulled from randomly while you gain reputation, and then you hit a reputation like point. Like right now we have from like starter to rookie, and then at rookie, in order to move up the level, you have to go back and meet them, do a little cutscene, do a little handmade, pre-made mission, then you go back through the hoppers and go through that way. So a combination of cutscenes, individual discussions, and then also a lot of stuff that makes it easier. Because at the end of the day, CIG needs to be able to make a game and needs to be able to do it quickly, especially with an evolving narrative, or to get people engaged and continue to be engaged with the narrative and with the game. So having fully voiced and fully mocapped seeds is expensive and time consuming. So I don't see that happening. But I do see that we're still going to have some of those in the game in some way, shape, or form.
What I think...
Go ahead, Matt.
Go on.
Sorry.
Yeah, Matty.
What I think we will see is like a mix up between Bethesda's approach and like what was it? The single player space game where Andromeda was the last entrance. Mass Effect.
Mass Effect, yeah.
Like we will get a lot of like animated and voiced quests, like where you pick it up in a bar or so, and it's like just an like a generated for that type of quest line, and the quality of the face animation will like degrade from the main story to the like random encounters that you have. But I think like with the technology that CIG is working on, it's not as notable like as in a Bethesda game or so.
Mm.
Like where you can like tell that what the spoken word is not what they actually the NPC is saying. And I think we will tend then more to that, like for the day-to-day quests we will receive. And yeah.
Al?
Yeah, I think pretty much like you and Joel, I think we're probably all going to have said. I think we'll see those animated cutscene type mocap scenes. Just because CIG have their fancy dancy mocap studio, so you want them to utilize it. Otherwise, it's just wasted money. So I think we'll see those at times. I think the idea would be to see them for those key hook points, and that the advantage of that is you've leveled up with Miles, and he said, "Yeah, great. I can now trust you to do these jobs." When I level up with Miles, I can get the same scene, and even though we're all getting the same scene, it's still Miles saying, "Yeah, you've just reached that level. I can trust you to do these types of missions now." So that type of repetitive, kind of low scale, no, not saving the world type missions, I think work.
Yeah.
I think you want that realism of not every call, not every communication you and I have is in video. Sometimes it's text, sometimes it's voice, sometimes it's voice and video. And so I think for realism you want that scale as well. So I'd like to think that's where CIG will go. If you don't, as Giles said, you don't want to go everything is audio and motion capture, because that just ends up reducing the quality of overall. You end up with a very shallow pool. By having all the options, you actually deepen the pool that you can have, and I think it does make it more real. So yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next question from Del Ener, who asks, what would your ideal result be for an event like Save Stanton, which has 3 chapters and will probably last a year be? Should player actions have an effect, or should CIG have full control, or a mix of the two? Mats, what do you think?
I think a mix of the two would be the best. Like, the general outcome would be clear, definite from CIG, but like the steps how we get there are like the player interactions and how fast and how in different side branches we would like expand. That's like player driven, so that CIG can still keep a grip on, okay, where do we want like the galaxy to develop and which of the next stories we want to tell, but still we get the feeling of, hey, we mattered, and we are the cause of what happened.
Jill?
I think that they'll, for any event, Save Stanton included, they'll probably have one outcome, and if they do have multiple outcomes, they'll have a list of multiple outcomes with an idea of how we could achieve them. Side A winning, side B winning. That goes for Save Stanton or in general. I think it would be good if the relationship for large universe-wide events, such as Save Stanton currently was a little bit more like the relationship between a D&D dungeon master and their game, where it's like going into it with an idea of what the outcomes could be, but if you surprise me, maybe things will change. Maybe the possibilities of outcomes could change. So that would be better, but I think they go in with it's like the Imperator election. They go in with the 5 candidates that they've picked. It's not that like we could elect you Imperator.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I'd
No
hope.
writing candidates.
Yeah. Al?
No, I was going to basically pick up the Imperator thing. So, with the Imperator, they had an idea of who they thought would win, but they also had stories kind of where they go if X person won. And I got the impression that the Imperator choice was not who we selected, was not, or who the masses selected. I certainly didn't pick Leonie Addison. I think the Xi'an plant, but certainly I got the impression that it surprised them as to which one was chosen. And yes, I was showing my my Mesorite tendencies, I think. Yes. So if I had a choice in of where I'd like to see the Safe Stanton go, of course, Hurston wins.
Yeah.
But realistically, it's that idea of, I think you want that. You don't want player control. As someone said in chat, you give players control, they'll destroy it. So you want that. You want the players to influence, but you don't want them to ultimately lose. So
yeah,
and we've seen that in the things we've been able to be involved in, the election of our Tavaran senator, the elections for Imperator, the two elections we've had. You know, we've had an influence, but as Joel said, we don't get to select who are the candidates. They're kind of
chosen
pre-vetted for us. And CIG are happy for any of those to be the one they have. They may have a favourite, but they leave it open for us to choose which one ends up being the case. So we end up with Leonie Addison because everyone wants
Chaos. The chaos candidate, as Sherry put it. I was going to say, actually, you said like, oh, you don't want the players to lose, unless I misheard. I actually would really respect if they did let us lose if we didn't engage. And like a narrative decision that I respect the most out of gaming was the framing of the sequel to XCOM. And they said, XCOM 2, canonically, you lost in the first game.
Yeah.
And players were like, but I won. It's like, yeah, but we see the data and only 98% of people lost. So canonically, that's the answer now.
Yeah.
And I really respect decisions like that, and I hope they do make decisions like that.
Go ahead, Jill. Or Al, sorry.
I used to do a D&D style con game. So we'd play massive game, big city, 30 or so teams, or 30 or so players in 6 or so teams. They'd play the scenario out, and we'd do 2 or 3 venues of it. In terms of working out the history for that story, which incidentally was telling the fall and decline of the Roman Empire in a different fantasy setting, we'd look at what happened in each of those events, and then we'd do, basically as Giles said, we looked at 98% of the results and said, that's the one that's history, even though this team changed the history over here. And I'd like to see that type of approach going forward. So I like that. But yeah, you do want to have that player influence, but you don't want the player to be. You want them invested, but you don't want them controlling. And if they don't get invested, you want the result to be negative. So I go back to what Aaron talked about back in 2014. So things have probably changed in terms of gameplay. But he talked about if the Vandal attacked Earth or Sol, and we don't do anything about it, Sol will get flipped to a Vandal system. It was that type of thing. And if we take a Vandal system and hold it long enough, the UEE will turn up and it will flip to a UEE system. So even back then, they were still looking at this dynamic universe. But if we don't invest in the things that are happening, bad things will happen, I think is what is on the cards.
I will say that I think Jail's point of view of like the DM style, I think is the most poignant way of putting things. CIG has to have an idea of where the story is going to go if they want the story to mean anything. Because as a forever DM, players are chaos. players will ruin your story because they don't know your story. So they'll do whatever they can to ruin your story. They'll do whatever one they think is fun because players often don't know what is fun is because they're just there to fuck around. And that's the hardest thing to do is to get players who either are not interested or not interested, not engaged, or not necessarily not engaged, but like new to like the idea of a TTRPG, or are intentionally there to just spike the story because they just want to be chaotic. Those two players are really difficult to deal with, and that's basically all of players in games, because no game player wants to be told what to do, because if they're told what to do, they'll go, no, I don't want to do that. I'll do the other thing. So having a story has to be there. There has to be some sort of narrative that they drive for, with some flexibility. Where like if the players do something fun, they can go, hey, there we go. I like that. We'll canonize that.
Well,
like Jumptown is a good example of that.
I was going to say, just like Jumptown.
Matt's is coming.
Go ahead, Matt.
What I think is when we talk about story in Star Citizen, the dangerous part is that people will start to think about it like it's an single player RPG, or even like Final Fantasy XIV in its like quest, like where you experience all that hardship and stuff like that. But I think more like the story will be the game telling on the situations with quests. Then they will be instanced and open world content, and the main story changes will be only like open world content that like then change the situation in a whole based on the amount of instance content people did. And it's not something like you are the part or you are the reason why it changed. It's more like we will be a part of a faction. The glory will go to the faction, or one of the leaders of the factions, like Admiral Bishop and military win. Maybe a lot of players fought with them, but in the end, it will be the Second Fleet that changed the story. And so CIG has like can tell a story, and it's not individualized for every player, but also every player gets a part in it if he wants or if she wants to play that part. And I don't think we will see like you are the main character or like an important character in any of the big quests or any of the big solutions in the Star Citizen universe. Like even with the main storyline from 1.0, it will be onboarding quests over and over and over again, showing us factions and what they think about the situations. I don't think the main story will have us like choose effectively or will push us in one direction. It will be like just the first 10 pages of a book over and over again, but of different points of views.
Well, we'll see, because they did say they want citizenship to be a reward for that, and one of the things that citizenship is you get citizenship for something good you did for the Empire. So if you, I don't think never-ending intro missions is going to qualify as something that's good for the Empire. There's going to have to be some sort of major event that players are going to interact with in order to get that. So there's some sort of thing you have to do, some sort of big heroic thing you have to do to get that citizenship. The question will become, what is that? It will be one thing or other things like that. But
And
I think we
I've
strayed
certainly
from
heard.
the original question.
yes, we
I
have.
can't remember what the question we were on.
Well, the question was what would the ideal result be for the event like Save Stanton? You know, should player actions have the effect, or should it be a mix of the two? And I think the idea being like what Matt was saying was like the question is the fundamental question is, what are the types of missions we're even going to get in Star Citizen?
Yeah.
Where is it going to even matter that we will have that option? The illusion of that, like we even have an option in the first place, or is it just going to be the way that the stories are being told in Star Citizen isn't like, here's a character, here you are the hero of the universe, you are the hero of Kuvach. It is, you are a pawn in the greater scheme of the universe, and your actions are not going to save the universe. Your actions are but a drop in a bucket of, gigantic proportions.
We influence events, but we don't control them.
Yeah.
We influence the economy, but we don't control it. I have a feeling that's
I control
where
the economy.
CIG will. Sorry.
Jail controls the economy is what he's trying to say.
Yeah. So I think that's where the type of thing that we'll see them go. But yeah, I don't see us being the full controllers of everything. I don't think that, I'm not going to save Stanton. I'm not going to be a great hero, save Stanton. I may have been at the Battle of Vega. I may have been firing a cannon at the Battle of Vega, which we all do if we play Squadron 42. But I don't save the day. I'm not the great massive hero who does everything. But I do understand, to pick up your citizenship idea, if we complete Squadron, we do get citizenship.
Well, and the main story of Star Citizen, 1.0 main story of Star Citizen, we also get citizenship.
Yeah, and so how else do you get citizenship? Because there's got to, and that's one of the things I liked about what they talked about at CitizenCon for the story in the Citizen in Star Citizen itself, is by putting that story in, you give players who have not played Squadron 42 the opportunity to learn about the lore, but also to gain citizenship. And citizenship matters. Like, one of the benefits of being a citizen is you can have a business that is across several systems. If you're only a civilian, you can only have a business in one system. And so for those who have visions of being a grandiose empire, you need to have citizenship. And it has other advantages, tax breaks or discounts, or so there are advantages, but there'll also be disadvantages. You go into another system which is not UEE, and being a citizen of the UEE may get you nada.
Let's keep going because we've still got a couple more questions, so I want to make sure we don't get too sidetracked. Steve the Dancer asks, do you feel the Expanse refinery ship will be extremely popular when material quality will really matter? Maybe. We don't know what other refinery ships are going to exist, though. That's the thing.
Yep.
And is it going to be the best quality, or is it going to be the most convenient because you can bring it to site?
Yeah.
These are kind of gameplay decisions that they'll need to make and balance and so forth.
Yeah. Also, could you build a better one on site?
Yeah.
Better quality. Because everything's going to have quality. Even the refineries may have quality. So, like, the refineries you get are not going to be as good. So,
to take a more positive answer to it, they're creating enough parameters that they can tweak around to make an engaging gameplay system.
Yeah.
Bingo.
And what do I need? Do I need it now, or do I want to wait until I've got 100% map to create the perfect one?
Yeah. Interesting. Like, the gameplay and the story of Star Citizen, in my opinion, has always been about making your actions matter. Having your actions have consequences. And that was one of the things early on they said a lot of. And I think that's a good way of putting it. It's like, do you want to have it quick, fast, or good? Choose two. And so no matter what that choice is going to be, that choice is going to have consequences. So, yeah. All right, next question comes from Phantom5692, who asks, how long do you see CIG dragging out the narrative that Star Citizen is a dystopia society? At what point will the pendulum start swinging towards the center? I'm going to address this one because this is something that I have propagated a lot. I don't think CIG intentionally created the Star Citizen story to be a dystopia. Based off of Jail, Algren, and I's conversation with Dave Haddock, he doesn't see it as a dystopia. He sees it as more of a shade of gray, that it's sort of a morally ambiguous universe where there are people who are good and there are people who are bad, but most people have some reasoning behind their actions. So I call it a dystopia because to compared to Star Trek, or even to a degree like Star Wars, the universe of Star Citizen is much more nebulous and has a lot more rough areas. And those are good because those mean gameplay. It's not fun to live in a house and have a mortgage and have kids and go to your 9-to-5 job every day. That's not fun. That's not what this game is designed to do. It's supposed to be a space adventure. So having swing things back to normalcy in Star Citizen would be like ending a war. It's good for the people who actually, deal with that situation, but bad for everybody who makes money off that war. And we're the people who make money off that war in that context. So
It's basically like Warhammer 40k. Like
Yeah.
we only hear about the bad things, but if you know the lore, you know there are hundreds of thousands of worlds out there. They never had an invasion in thousands of years. They live peacefully in the Imperium of Man or somewhere else and don't deal with anything what the story is about. So
I think there's an
Also,
element
I
where you
mean-
can
go ahead, Joe.
go on, Joe.
I was going to say, one of the common criticisms of the UEE is that it's USA in space,
Mhm.
and it's military and it's senator and all this. And the USA is a dystopia, unfortunately. I mean,
Yes.
from the
yes, it
perspective
is.
of most people,
As the only person who lived in this in the United States, yes, it
Yeah.
is a dystopia.
and also as the only person who in the last 12 months has changed which country they live in
yeah.
and moved from the UK to Denmark. And I'm looking back at the UK, and there's a lot of things that I accepted and didn't think about because they were too painful to think about because I couldn't change anything
Mhm.
while I was living there. And I look back and I go, oh my God, my home country is a lot more of a dystopia than I gave it credit for. If we continue to make games that look like the modern world, they are going to be dystopias, unfortunately. And that's kind of a part of any piece of media being a product of the world in which it exists in the real world.
Yeah, that's Dave in the writing team are writing the UEE to reflect the realities of the world that we live in today. And because they're reflecting those realities, a lot of the same sort of issues are going to come up. And it's a video game. So it has to have conflict. You don't have good stories without conflict. And so you need that conflict. And where best to pull it from the headlines, or from history, where actually these conflicts happened. So it seems dystopian to the average player because it probably is, because that's how history is made. History is not often made in nice places with clean rooms and very prosperous people. It's made in very bad decisions or very squalor areas or through revolutions or changes in power or whatever. Those things happen. But
You heard it here first. Paul's leading the revolution against the modern US dystopia.
yes.
I also look at it in terms of the way in which CIG drafted the people for the elections, for the Imperator elections.
Mhm.
None of them was perfect.
No.
Mhm.
Every one of them had something that was good and half a dozen things that were really bad. And it was choosing what you thought was the
Least
choice
bad.
of
Yeah.
the least bad. I think most of the community picked the worst of the lot because we picked Leilani Addison because she was AI, and everyone thought, oh, that means we'll get AI quicker.
Yeah.
No,
As we've seen.
as we've seen. But yeah, it was that type of. There was no real perfect choice, and there was no real absolutely disgusting choice. They all had merits and they all had failings, and that kind of, if that's dystopian, then bring it on because it also felt more real.
And I
Uh,
think
Go ahead.
most recent theme, like probably everyone here also in the chat notice is with Pyro, what people thought about what it would be and what CIG intended it in the end, what they wanted to be. Because when you say frontier, you dream about what America was back then to cowboy ages, and you ride from town to town, and the problems are localized. And what Pyro was actually like another region in the modern day where they had conflict in the last few months. And there are several factions in one country that's all fighting for the power, and it's more messy and not really organized, and that's what they wanted to go for from the beginning because of all the different factions. So yeah, I think it's also like communications, like what CIG really like tries to achieve. And they keep it very vague. I get it because of the they don't want to go deep into the lore, but also they use wrong analogies like for it in a lot of cases, so people get the wrong idea. I think
they can do that, yeah, for sure. I just know from talking with, like, I've been calling it a dystopia because that's an interesting title to lead with a video and to kind of like explain to people, because I do think there's a lot of people who see Star Citizen and go, oh, it's Star Trek Utopia, because they see like the advertisements and like the ship advertisements and stuff like that. It's like, oh, these people are this, like, look at all this great. It's like, have you never been to Hurston? Have you never been to Loreville? Like, have you never seen this?
It's a wonderful place to visit. What are you talking about?
Central Business District is wonderful, but then again, you have a giant golden statue of a dead man. Like, it's a lot more like ancient Egypt than it is like, modern dystopia.
Just because a Hurston guy put a statue that looks vaguely like a statue of Nero is irrelevant.
People are saying, why did they have to bring reality into my space game? Because it's more fun.
Like we should try to maintain the escapist appeal of justice, and even if it's the one place where we can stick it to the oligarchs of Hurston or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's part of escapism. But if you're going to make a game, where it's humans in the future in a context of conflict, parallels are going to be drawn to something.
Yeah. I think it's still going to be an escapist where you're there, but it's not a power fantasy. Star Citizen's not a power fantasy. You're not there to be the person. You're not going to save the universe. You're just a dude. You're just a dudette. You're just a person in a universe.
Yeah, we're not going to overthrow the Hurstons or the people in ArcCorp or Crusader or Microtech. We may influence them. We may cause their product to go down a little. I fully expect we're going to see contested zones underneath Hurston. We'll see them in ArcCorp. We'll see contested zones in Orison, just like the Siege of Orison. There'll be areas like that, but a contested zone. We'll see contested zones in Microtech. Going forward, both systems are going to be exactly the same, I think. There's going to be that little corner of Earth, a little corner of this universe, which appeals to someone, and they'll just make it their home and delve deep. And
I think there'll be something, at least narratively speaking, that's for everybody. That's kind of what they want to go for. So, and it's the reason why each system's going to be different in terms of its flavor and culture and those things. All right, next question comes from Steve the Dancer, who says, at the moment, a prospector full of tier 1 materials, we don't know if it's tier 1 or not, but takes about 24 hours to refine, and a mole takes 3 to 4 days to refine. Do you think that refining orders takes too long? Yes and no. I'm not much into this field of things, but I will say that the reason why those are long are to slow down progression, because they don't want you to be able to just power level, because a lot of those materials are very valuable and you can make a lot of money. And comparatively speaking, mining doesn't take as long as anything else in the game, and it isn't as dangerous as something like, say, bounty hunting. So those slow times are there to specifically slow you down for terms of power leveling money. But they're also placeholders. eventually those times will be changed or even go away entirely as players begin to be able to refine. So they'll find some sort of average player time for refining and put it in. I don't know, but I think they're where they need to be for the current time. But I am not the right person to ask about that specifically. Does anyone else want to put in there?
What
They
you
have
said.
enough parameters to optimize a fun game system out of.
Yeah. So I was saying mining is far less profitable per time investment than salvage. I don't know. I have enough data on that, so I couldn't tell you if it was, what that whole thing is. But I know that's the reason why they have that thing. And I think. Go ahead, Al.
I will just say on that I find salvage more therapeutically relaxing than mining, but I couldn't say whether it's more profitable or not. But I certainly find it more.
Yeah, and it'll change. So eventually, they'll move it around. I don't know what the right answer would be. I don't know if the answer is to like make salvage, people who do salvage refine their materials as well. But we're still kind of in that early stage where other things need to be fall into place before they start changing things around. So,
yeah.
All right. All MMOs carry the tag "Write your own story" against the backdrop of canvas to play on. How will that square with a story CIG wants to tell with Star Citizen 1.0? That's the question we've been trying to talk about for the last hour or two. I don't think any one of us knows that answer. I don't even know if CIG fully knows that answer. But the one thing I will say is I hope they don't forsake the original idea where the main concept is you are a part of the universe, you are not the universe. Because I just dislike that narrative of you're the chosen one for every main story of an MMO, because it always feels very contrived. But that's just me. Al?
No, I agree. I like one of the things I liked coming into Star Citizen was the fact that we were only a small fraction of the universe, and so we could influence but not control. And that's basically that, we may be a hero, we're not the hero. And that's I think the difference. And I like that idea. I don't even think, as Jaded Cynic says in the chat, if you want to be the chosen one, go play Squadron 42. I don't even think in Squadron 42 we're the chosen one. We are a hero.
Yeah.
Cal Mason's a bigger hero than we are. So at least from my understanding. I could be wrong. I haven't read the story. But, Cal Mason is a bigger hero than we are. And I think he'll be a bigger hero than we'll ever be. I think Old Man Cotton's probably a bigger hero than we'll ever be.
Joe?
Bishop is the hero.
Yeah, I think that there's 3 different stories that we will experience to different degrees while playing Star Citizen. There's the story... I think that there will be a story where we are a little bit the special person in the special place at the special time, being this main story, where we all have to maintain a suspension of disbelief that this thing that is clearly everyone gets a chance to do was special to our character, whatever it is. There's the story which is that time that Paul loaded a tank into the back of a ship and dropped it on the enemy base, which is the make your own adventure. And then there's the story of how the whole server pulled together and what did you do in the Great Battle of 2954 to defeat the Vandal kingship that was the special event that month. And those 3 things aren't in conflict. They're all contributing to your story. I think we just have to accept suspension of disbelief when it comes to the parts where it is who really was the person who saved Leilani Anderson from being hijacked by a Xenothreat or whatever some plot point is, because it doesn't. I don't think that will affect my enjoyment of that. And if it does, I just won't play those quests.
Mats?
Yeah, I think also like we get like our daily experience. That's our story that we tell. There are like the big events that we can take a part of and be the hero story for ourselves, but not entirely for like everyone. And yeah, like then there are like the big changing missions for the whole server. But what I don't think is that we, in any shape or form, get like the narrative hero perspective, even in a light form, because of the question, would you have to relive that as a new person after you had like your normal lifespan expires or you died the ninth time? So I think even like something that is getting citizenship or something like that, it will feel more not special. Let's put it that, not like that special event where it like changed course for any type of story than ourselves. It's like not connected to the big world.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Renamon asks, oh no, I already answered that one. We just did. Walter asks, do you guys feel we will get special crafting schematics from in-game events like Save Stanton in the future? Once crafting gets in, example, do we kill the Vandal invasion and get alien stuff? They already said yes. Maybe not alien stuff, but yeah, crafting schematics are definitely going to be rewards for mission quests. So
we may not get the alien stuff, but we may get some really nice materials to craft some really nice.
Yeah, or the UEE chucks us a F7A schematic for being good boys and girls and fighting off the Vandal, something like
I mean, they talked about that there also be like prototype schematics that we get, like not only military but also prototype stuff, if I remember correctly. And I mean, possibly there could be like alien stuff in it, but then it would be available for like at some point first the UEE story-wise and then us, I think.
Which will be exciting because currently the only game that rewards you with classified military schematics are War Thunder and DCS.
Well, the problem is those are out of game rewards. You have to go to the forums to get those.
It's the meta narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually a big problem inside the War Thunder community because they say, well, I play all this time in hours and all I have to, and nobody has to play the game. They can just go to the forums and get all the authentic military action experience.
But I love that narrative that people are arguing about details and then someone just drops in with a classified document and just leaks information.
Yeah.
All right.
A bit of a worry, isn't it?
Next question comes from Walter again, who says, do you also feel crafting schematics are going to be reward for mission reputation rewards? Yes. Almost. Yep. Yeah. They've already said that. So.
Yep.
Renamon asks, oh, no, that's already. That's a statement saying that they already said that plus lootable discovery from the loot table. The question will be the quality of the blueprint. Yeah, that's the question. The quality of the blueprint. But I don't think it's actually going to be the quality of the blueprint because blueprints are the same quality. The thing that's the quality is you have to research. You have to research things to increase the quality of the thing you already have. So
There's
maybe
lots of
the
parameters to build a good gameplay system around.
Yeah.
Quality of the equipment, of the blueprint, of the materials that go into it. Maybe just a blueprint that requires fewer materials than the standard. All of these are advantageous.
Maybe it's also to talk about like civilian, industrial, military, like that kind of quality.
Mm-hmm.
I just think just go raid Asperia. Raid their offices.
They have all of them.
Yeah, they've got all of them, and if I don't have them, they collect them. So, yeah.
All right. All right, this is a good one. I'm going to let me see. I'm going to stop the questions for now because we're kind of coming up there. Stop. I'm gonna.
So if you wanted to ask a question, you're just plumb out of luck because a bot is being killed.
Yes, I'm going to end the unpin. There we go. All right, so I'm going to save this question for the last question because I think it's a good question. But Renamon asks, the next question after that is, and Renamon asks, but do you want systems like Pyro to be in a state of forever conflict, where the king of the hill ebbs and flows only between chosen set of factions? Yes.
I mean, they are they. It's also like in the plan of CIG and what they want for end content of the game,
Mhm.
like Pyro in specifically what they showed, and maybe they will change it later down the line. But what it will be in 1.0 is this system where like all the player factions are like actually fighting over control, and the NPC factions, I think, will be more like a controller for CIG to regulate the conflict between the players. Like they can like say, okay, the pirate faction now attacks this leading player faction and stuff.
Mhm.
So naturally, Pyro will be this uh, everlasting fight between players, NPCs, and NPCs and players, because it has to be for the player economy also.
Yeah. In the grim darkness of the 30th millennium, there is only war.
And
that's
given
the
the
point.
fact,
You know?
given the fact that in Pyro you can back the headhunters, you can back Citizens Prosperity, you can back the other factions. So players are going to be having an influence there.
Mhm.
Now you want it to be that, but you also don't want it to forever. The dance forever being the same, but you know the dance is forever changing, but the dance forever being
Yeah.
the same. You, in a sense, want there to be some change. You want to be able to see a progression of progress going on.
Yes.
Or whatever that is. And so if it's just forever never changing, then I don't think that's a good thing.
No,
But you do want things.
It wouldn't be a good thing if it's just switching between 3 states. Like, let's say there's 3 gangs, and depending which gang's in vogue at the moment, it's a different set of services on Ruin Station, something like that.
Yeah.
It would be better if it was just systemic and it will equilibrate and it'll ebb and flow, and they can throw a bomb in, to mix things up again, so that it's not that the dance is just switching between 3 states. It's whether like the King of the Hill stuff, is that going to include player factions, or is there going to be sort of the player faction King of the Hill and the PvE King of the Hill scenario running in parallel? We have to wait and see for any of that, though.
I that's a good point of view, I think, and I think if the question is more about will we have the same factions over and over again, the answer is no. We'll probably see CIG come up with new factions and other things like that, but I do see that's the point of Pyro. Pyro is supposed to be faction warfare. It's supposed to be PvE and PvP meet. We already know that to a degree, we kind of already have that answer. There will be a forever war between the PvE factions, and the PvP factions will be fighting over the seal stations so that they can control and defend their own stations for permanent protection. So there will be sort of this duality where the PvE players are focused on Bruin and the PvP players are focused on seal. So
Xenothreat,
and I think you'll probably see that.
Xenothreat, Anathreat, Benathreat.
But
just
but
alien bad.
That, yeah, like you'll see those types of things in most systems where there's lack of control for those, where you need to have those shields to protect your bases or whatever. But you also, as the empire or the systems expand, and we end up with the Tavaran new civil war at the Branna system, and that becomes a focus of where the gameplay is. You'd hope that other areas would become more, I suppose, stabilized or civil. Whether it's the gangs that are in control now impose a law that basically, brings that stability, or whether it's a UEE or whether it's an independent faction. But you do want that sense that the systems ebb and flow between chaos and order. And that would be a nice thing to see, that Pyro's not always just forever war, but there are times where it goes through a lull period or a stable period and then erupts again. And
I think we'll definitely see that also in the narrative of the events, like early systems. So like each system's gonna have its own theme, and so if somebody's like, well, I don't want to be in Pyro where everything is just like stabbing each other in the liver constantly, kidney punches all the way down. I think it's gonna be you don't have to be. You can go to Nyx, or to Castra, or to Terra, like where where you won't have to deal with that as much. But people in Pyro will have an advantage because they also have all of the rare materials and the highest quality materials because it's constantly in this chaotic conflict. So it's a question of more balance rather than simply purely narrative concepts. It's just what is fun, how does it work, and I'm sure if it doesn't work properly, CIG will change it
to make it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question comes from this is actually kind of a cool like add-on to that. Call Me Teach says, I thought I'd throw this question in the mix. How long do you think it'll take for CIG to add the rest of the factions to Pyro? I can't be a fire rat, and now I'm sad about it. I too wish to feel the whispers of the prophet on the nape of my neck. But that's a good question. If we take Chris Roberts' letter from the chairman at its face value, I think those additions of different factions is an easy content win for CIG to do and would make sense for CIG to focus on this year. But it's entirely up to that.
I could see that also being a way to dilute the power of those factions that we've got at the moment that we can side with. The second you add another 2 or 3 factions, the players go to play those ones, and so you'll see the strength of the factions in power drop.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see that as a way of balancing or bringing about change within the system. But yeah, it'd be nice to see all the factions that are in there have an ability to side with them, and they'll each have benefits and negatives.
Mats, do you think we're going to see factions, new factions come in for Pyro sooner or later?
I would say more midterm. It would be probably not in the next patches, like the next 2 or so, just because of all the assets they need for those factions also. And I think a lot of people would be a little bit disappointed because the only difference of the factions is how they look. They don't play different. You don't get any like special bonuses, special mission types. Even for the fire rats, like you want to be, I don't know, like burnt skin or something, being a little bit more specific for these very specific factions. So I think we will see some more factions till the end of the year for sure, but not in the extent that people want them to be, like as with the system of Pyro, where everyone thinks, oh yeah, that's the new big thing and everything will be different, and then it's actually like not really. I think for that we have to wait a little bit further. But if you don't only want the cosmetics, yeah, probably till the end of the year, 1 or 2, maybe.
Okay. Jail, do you think we're going to see new stuff coming up, new factions being added to Pyro soon?
I think I kind of think that when questions make for the most interesting CIG answers and announcements, and the least interesting fan speculations, because I mean, the more meaningful they are, the longer they'll take as well. So do we want just do we want the factions without the content? I don't know.
Yeah.
They'll arrive when they'll arrive, and I'll play them.
Yeah. I think that picks up the. I think they'll go down the line of not putting the factions in until they've got content for them. It's a bit like not putting ships in now until they've got the gameplay for them. So I'd like to think they go down that line, but we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, there will be exceptions, like with the ships and waiting for the
Yeah.
content.
I think they realise that they get punished more for releasing something that is not fun than they do for just not releasing it.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
I think we've taught them that lesson too many times. That if they don't release something, we'll moan about it, but that's just the normal background of people following Star Citizen. That
Yep.
Yeah.
things aren't out yet. Whereas if
But if they release something,
if it
it's
arrives
dumpster
and it's
fire.
bad,
Mhm.
then that's much worse. Much worse.
I mean, that's what the letter of the chairman was all about. Like,
Yeah.
we want to focus about the fun and the gameplay. Please.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next question, which is Phantom asks, how long is CIG going to maintain the narrative that the UEE is a dystopia? Wait, we've already answered that question.
Did that one. USA is a dystopia.
I think he answered. I think he asked that question twice, so that's why it popped up again.
It is one of the problems with the bot, I think.
Yeah.
The bot is wonderful.
Tazwin asks, do you think we will get item rewards, maybe even ships in story missions? Yes, we already have with Say Stanton. So, yes, 100%.
Yep.
And we will with Save Stanton Chapter 2. All right, so I'm going to ask Steve's question, then Philippe's, and then go back to Steve's question that he asked earlier. So Steve asks, do you feel there will be a crafting deck in every system? If so, do you think if you want to make something at base quality, like a fabricator deck, where you can go to the deck on a station and go fabricate something in that station versus having to build your own fabricator or, have it in a ship. Do you think we'll have some sort of like street level access to fabrication in the game? Al, what do you think?
I think for playability, they probably will.
Okay.
Or there'll be an easy way to get to the place that's got it. So whether it's a neighbouring system. But yeah, otherwise it feels like you'd be punishing people who haven't purchased that thing.
There may be a fee to it.
Purchasing it just makes it convenient.
Yeah. I guess there might be a fee to it. I could see it, but yeah. Jail?
Yes, I think just like mining and refining, they'll expect that gameplay system to be as accessible that anyone can go and buy the multi-tool and go and try and do some hand mining as a taster of like, hey, maybe you want to invest some time into renting a prospector. It'll be the same for letting people dip their toes into fabricating.
Mats?
I would agree to 80% of that, just because fabricating would tie into the NPC NPC economy. Thank you very much. So that it would be, if you just want to have quick access to an item, you would go to a shop and buy it instead of fabricating it yourself. But not as big as an not as big as an hurdle to get into. So you have to dedicate hours of gameplay to unlock it. But like you said, like a fee, or like you have to rent a location or something like that in any shape or form, so that you can tip your toes into it very early on if you want to do that, but not in that point that like in other MMO games or like crafting games where you have the crafting table like in the 5th minute and there are basic tools everywhere. Like, I don't think that will be probably the feature that CIG wants it to be.
I could definitely see it also being a time thing where like for like your fabricator that you build yourself on a planet, it's going to be like leaps and bounds better. There's got to be a reason to make your own fabricator. There's got to be gameplay reasons for you to move that direction. Without that, no one will do it.
Yeah. But I think your general citizen's experience of it is going to be a lot of FOMO because they are going to get blueprints as drops, as we've discussed. So you're going to have this inventory of blueprints, some of which maybe you think you're going to sell, but some of which go, oh, you could craft this if you find 3 iron or whatever.
Yeah.
And you try that a couple of times, and you see all the nice things that you need a level 2 or level 3 fabricator for.
Yeah.
And that's how you induct people into a system, into a gameplay system.
Yeah, to get them to go, oh, well, I'll go over there, or I'll find somebody who knows this, and that also encourages gameplay because like interactions. So that you may not have a level 2 fabricator, but your friend might, or another person you know might. Now suddenly you're like,
and they may not have that blueprint you've got, so it becomes a nice synergy
for making players interact. Yeah,
like that's also like a point where I'm coming from because I'm a trader from heart on, and I don't want to have to do anything with mining, base building, or fabricating or stuff, anything like that. I want to have other players where I can throw money at them, and they upgrade my stuff, build my stuff for me. I don't have to know them. I don't have to be in the same org as them, but I'm a customer. Here, take my money. I get the stuff, and I'm off. Like, I don't want it anywhere that you have to engage in any kind of gameplay so you can progress to something that you want.
Yeah. So not forcing players to do gameplay they don't want to do, but like giving them, I can see it. All right, so there's actually one I skipped, which we'll go over real quickly, which is Essential Asa asks, would CIG ever consider audio tours of locations through the Mobiglass glass? Maybe, but I think that's definitely a Galactopedia, where the Galactopedia comes in. Now, I hope the Galactopedia has a voice, because a lot of those sorts of in-game encyclopedia, like Wikipedia, sort of like location where you can go like read stuff about the background, a lot of that does have a voice option. So I'd love to have a voice option with that. But I don't think that you'd need to have like the old museum tours where you put in your headphones and says start the player now, and you press play on the recorder, and you walk, and it'll kind of explain those sorts of things. I don't think you'll ever have something like that, but you might have something where you can. I think they had that in Starfield, where you could go up to like the museum before you go join the United Colonies, and they were like told you the history, and you push a button, and it would like kind of light up the things, and it would have a voiceover kind of talking about that.
It would be very smart if the Mobiglass did give you a notification of there is a Galactopedia article about the thing you're looking at.
Yeah, like a little update being like, whoop, hey, take a look at that.
They kind of have that stuff already on Horizon. If you go to the there are like info boards.
Yeah.
And they have like a play button in the right upper corner. You can push them, and it will read the text out loud. So
there's also, while we don't have it at the moment, there's the Arc Station.
Yeah.
The Arc Station Museum, which is basically the repository of all things, which is kind of where the star map is kind of developed and comes from. So I could imagine if you go there, you could get more of that interaction with the exhibits or information. So there's lots of options CIG have got to go that they've already established exist in the game or exist in the universe. It's just we don't see it at present.
Yeah, I think building a systemic solution to the problem rather than a bespoke solution to the problem is what CIG would do. And I think the easiest systemic solution for CIG would be just to make it so that you're staring at something, a prompt will pop up saying, check out your Mobiglass for said thing, and then or check out the Galactopedia for said thing, and you click on it, and then it would give you sort of like text, or you can click a play, and someone will read the voiceover of what's going on. But
so great. So we get Mobiglass ads.
Yes.
You've just watched this episode.
Yeah. Would you like to watch the next one?
Yeah. Would you like to watch this one?
Jenny's saying like, is this just Clippy? So it's like Clippy's like, do you want to hear about the UEE?
Yeah. Hey, I would love some of immersion in that sense, for someone to be like, shut up, Galactopedia. I know, I'm in the middle of fighting this guy. Would you like to know about the Vandal? Unless you're going to give me a gun, shut up,
I'm hiding.
But
What was that? You're hiding? No.
Ba-ding! Hiding places in the verse. Like, god damn it.
and I mean, for the other stuff, I mean, even now we have the guide system. There are a lot of players that are willing to give you any kind of tour
Mhm.
and tell you about stuff. Not
Yeah.
about everything, but about a lot.
And then it's also something, I do the lore tours all the time on the floor of, different events. I'm sure I know other people do similar stuff with like tours around the Stanton system where like they say, on your left, you will see, Hurston, we're currently leaving Lorville. Lorville was founded in blah, 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 that kind of thing. So. All right, we've got 2 more questions, and then we're wrapping it up. The second last question is from Philippi13, who asks, is there a possibility of there being a branching storyline in Star Citizen? Something where choices will change the outcome of the narrative? Not in a traditional sense, I don't think. Not in the traditional Chris Roberts sense where, your choices will lead you down different paths, and those different paths lead to completely different outcomes for the end game, because of, I think we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of hours, which is just, there needs to be a story. There needs to be some sort of movement and some sort of narrative that goes forward. And if there are several million people who have this game, and if every person had an influence that direct on something, I don't think that would happen. But I think we also talked about this before. You talked about this, Mats, where with like the Helldivers 2 example, where like you might be able to slowly influence the change by doing specific actions, but that's not going to really branch as much as it's just going to alter the course of those things. And not like your experience will be different from somebody else's experience because of this, but like that sort of thing. So what do you think, Al?
I could see them doing something like that, picking up what Matthew said, where if 90% of a population of players do mission X and go down that line, I could see that's where the story gets skewed. And then those people who didn't choose that, well, that's because, yes, you were in this aspect, you were on the losing side, if that sense. That sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the UEE is now drifted this way. You could keep going down your negative line if you want, but you're really drawn into that new line that the UE is going. So I could see that. But if you're really after that story, that one-off story where you are able to change it, have a bigger impact, you're playing Squadron 42.
Mm-hmm. And there's still probably
So
going to be a canonical ending to Squadron 42, but yeah.
I mean, it has to be. It is already like history. What happens in Squadron 42 and how the outcome is.
Yeah.
I think these branching stories. When you think about the series The Mandalorian, you probably will get 2 places to a small village, and they get harassed by bandits, and then you can like in Fallout, you talk to each side and choose a side, and then that settlement gets taken over for a time or something like that, and you actually had an influence for yourself.
It's a bit
But-
like
Yeah, if it happens, I think it would be minor, and it would be it'd be very minor impacts. Like, did you say mission giver A or mission giver B? Well, then that's the one you'll see later. Kind of like Caden and Ashley in Mass Effect 1 and later games.
Yeah,
and
a bit like.
I mean,
I
yeah, but maybe it is value adding to have parts of the main story where you've got to pick one of 3 little quest lines, and maybe they all come back together. But if you want to see the other ones, you've got to maybe start a new character, because I mean, again, that just it's value adding because it means that you've made a choice that has been special for that run, that playthrough, and it does cause you to go back. I mean, I'm thinking again of Morrowind, one of my favorite games ever, where you could choose one of the great houses of Morrowind to join, and that was a quest line, and it locked off the other 2.
Yep.
And they never really did that again in the Elder Scrolls,
Oblivion
apart
or
from like the
Skyrim.
you had the Imperial Stormcloaks. That's it.
I will add this before letting you go, Al. I could see that being because the main conflict in Star Citizen is supposed to be, the main story is supposed to be the Earth Terra conflict that's going on, that sort of separation. So I could see the main mission having a end point where you pick a side, where like you are siding with Terra or Earth, and that will then drive you down different story options and different unlocks. But I don't see that as really a branching narrative as much as it's a your personal choices will matter to your personal reputation, like anything else. Like just a big version of the faction conflict instead of these little tiny factions of the systems. You're talking about inter-system factions dealing with that sort of thing. It's what Jail's saying, like sort of like you're picking the big boy. Who are you really, found like backing for this big conflict? Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to say in the Squadron 42 twos that we saw, you do have those options. Do I save McLaren? Do I go without McLaren?
Mm-hmm.
So they have their choices you make. Do they change the story? No, but they do change. They may change the way in which Bishop or others react to you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that kind of balance where you're changing a bit like with the choose an option and it closes off the other options you've got because you've went down that line. So it gives the players choice, but it doesn't change the overarching story, I suppose.
Yeah. All right, this is the last question, which I say because I thought it was a pretty good one. It covers a little bit about Star Citizen, and I'm going to let Jail answer this one first because this one was specifically dealing with Jail's conversation about regen. But it has to do with what regen is for, which is Death of a Spaceman. Shampasta asks, some people feel that Death of a Spaceman is bad because over time a player gets attached to their in-game avatar, and having to restart a new character is bad, and players may stop playing. What are your thoughts? Good, bad, or ugly?
I think that the gameplay aspect and design is prime, and really that hasn't changed. It was always every time you die you're trying your luck, and maybe this will be your last. That was from the first Death of the Spaceman. The context around it has changed. The mechanics in how they explain it have changed, but really a lot of it is still the same. That you were always dicing with real death, and so that never changed. Do I think that's great? It has pros and cons. It has the pro of allowing death and conflict and player adversary relationships, while also kind of attaching this weight that if someone just pops you randomly, that's probably not going to be a real death. But if you're the kind of person who's continuously flying into the sun, you're going to open an account with the Undertaker. And it's I think that's the bed that they made long ago and lay in. I've never really had any problems with that. I more had problems with other issues around how they decided to launch and change things, which were mostly real world, more project management and annoyance at bad comms and stuff like that than actually a criticism of what's going in the game in the end, which is what we're getting.
Al, do you think it's a good idea, Death of the Spaceman?
I think Death of the Spaceman is a great idea. We're not immortal, and the idea was always that you would have, as Giles said, death would matter, choices matter, and eventually you'd get to the point where your character would be dead, and you would be inheriting from you'd kind of ones I heard is either you'd wake up at the character screen looking in the mirror as your new character, or you'd be at the gravesite as your character. They've died this hero's death, or they've died this whatever death, and you're now inheriting their stuff, and that would give you a choice of, you wouldn't lose all your rep because you'd still have some familial rep, but it would give you a chance to redirect where you went or undo the errors you'd made. So you have, as Jaded Cynic says, you have an error and you carry on. It just gives you but it gives that sense of not being infinite and not being existing forever. Could they have had a better method than the regen check? Yeah. but I always saw the regen tech not as changing death of the spaceman. It was just explaining it in a way that they thought. I think using Vandal tech and re-engineering Vandal tech for our own purposes is wrought with disaster, and I think we haven't heard the last of what's happening with that tech or what's going on, man.
Yeah.
So
Matt?
yeah.
Mats, your thoughts? Do you think Death of the Spaceman is a good mechanic?
I think how CRG intended it or wanted to be, it is a good mechanic. I think the problem the community now has with Death of a Spaceman is that it's not well explained because it's not very defined yet. And when people think about someone telling them, yeah, the game will kill your character, they think about hardcore MMOs, like the hardcore version of Path of Exile 2 or World of Warcraft, the hardcore servers, where you have stats, where you have special gear, and it's you start at 0 and grind the same path again till you reach the point where you died, and you have to do that over and over and over again if you're not good enough. And I think that's where people come in and say, yeah, I don't want that in Star Citizen. And that's not what it will be. We know that so much because we don't have stat points in Star Citizen like that. We don't level our characters. We have reputation, and we get like a soft setback, or and it will be more of a continuance and a forced branch in how you interact with the game world because of the lost reputation you got, but also like ships or weapons, how we inherit them. That's not very clear yet. So there is a big fear of, will I lose everything? Do I have to pay a fee, like to inherit it? Will it be lost if I don't? Will it be stored till I get the fee paid? And I think that's the big concern of how much do I actually lose if I die? And because no one is really talking about it, like not technically but philosophically, a lot of people think about it as a hard reset, and that's not what it will be. We don't, the details we don't know, but it will not be a hard reset. That's what we know.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's the gameplay side of thing, which, as you say, I don't think has ever really fundamentally changed. I just felt, I mean, I felt very frustrated, and it was more concerns about the standard and nature of sci-fi that they're aiming for, when they were quite happy having a discussion where they said, if you get shot in your arm, that can damage your arm DNA, and then when they clone you from your backup, you might not have an arm. Because I have no issue with the idea that if you die with arm damage and you could have a prosthetic, that's the cool part. That's the cool part. But when they get the, as you say, the explanations and the narrative explanation, and it's not just sort of the aspect of sci-fi where we fill in what we don't know or we go beyond what we don't know, like having faster light travel. It was a version of sci-fi where they were expecting us to not know how DNA works. Yeah. That DNA is in every cell of your body. That if you damage your arm, it doesn't make any difference to the DNA that made that arm. And trying to, like, that's just low standards. That's just like crap, basically. And I don't want it to be that. I want it to be well written. And the reason why we were having that discussion was because they were kind of making those writing proposals without going through the writers. Yeah. And the writers got their hands on it later and came up with Regeneration, which was fine. And that was the issue I had with it, was more just like the writing, the narrative, and the lore side of things was being treated as something to be sorted out later. When Star Citizen works best, when the artists are engaging with the material going back, and you get things like a 2014 document causing someone to say Henoism when they talk about a 2025 full
Yeah.
reveal of
Yeah.
of an environment in character.
It's
Yeah.
the writing process should go hand in hand with the developers. The writing should never overwrite the developers, but the developers should always keep in mind to give you the context to put it in a way that I think Al would put it as well. It's where John Crew decides to make the Ares because he wants to make a combat Crusader ship, despite the fact that the entire narrative of Crusader is that they're pacifists, basically.
And to blow Benoit's trumpet as well, Kruger Intergalactic would have been a better choice for
Yes.
that ship that was basically a upgunned, upsized Pisces P-52.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So yeah, it's I agree that I think it was a ham-fisted decision that they're going to have to learn to live with, and they're gonna. It's definitely going to have to be. It has to be explained better because, like as far as I know, it doesn't have anything to do with DNA, but it also has to.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
they haven't. They walked back on that. It was in the original.
It was
earliest announcement, right? And like I say, being a biologist, I would have immediately told you your brain is rejecting the organ because the brain thinks that it's lost it. We bought that with the Matrix.
Yeah,
we can buy that here. That's fine.
Yeah.
That works perfectly.
Trauma is not something we fully understand in the brain today. So it's easy to just be like, trauma did it. Okay, why? What is trauma?
Yeah.
Trauma's fucking weird. It does weird things to people's brains. All right,
we don't know what it is, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they ended up going with.
Yeah, but it's as Jail's point of view is that they just sort of had to trip over themselves to get to that point, and they had to work with themselves ways back to get to that point. And in terms of the mechanics, though, I will say before I let you go, Matt, the mechanics of the thing, I think Death of a Spaceman, as you were saying, Matt, is fundamentally misunderstood by most players because I think most players think it's Path of Exile 2. Hardcore.
My story's ended.
Wow. Yeah, I got to start again. And it's not. It's much more along the lines of each life is more of a ding on your hard health bar. And I think most people miss the point of it. The point of it was more to allow for players to make mistakes and have these problems, and also to have like consequences for your actions. And those actions build up over time. But even CIG has said the idea that you could reverse some of this process, where you could get some of your lives better by doing certain missions. So players who are really invested in their characters could always go back and fix the problems later, but that still requires them to invest time in doing something else. Actions having consequences. But it also does stem from CIG's desire to explain everything, absolutely everything in the game, which they don't always have to because mysteries are good. It's okay to have like, why did this thing happen? I don't know. We can do a little exploration there, but like players do that. So,
and the other thing to point out to people is that at the moment, like I did see in chat, someone was saying that people just go around killing people for lols at the moment.
Yeah,
and they do partly because at the moment it doesn't
There's no consequences.
matter.
Yeah,
there's no consequences. It doesn't matter because we're still in the alpha beta process, and Death of a Spaceman does not matter at this point in time. Because it doesn't matter how many times you die, you still come back. Once we go into release, we will have X number of lives per character, and yes, you can extend them by doing extra insurance or extra missions or
not dying.
Yeah,
not dying. Yeah. So
go ahead, Matt.
It feels to me that one of the main ways people are going to interact with it is, if you're dying once every play session, that's fine. If you're dying 100 times, you're going to go through a few hard deaths.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like it's a frequency thing. I think that's going to be one of the main impacts on it. Is just don't die too many times in too short period.
Yeah.
The biggest problem on the whole Death of a Spaceman thematic is also the biggest feature, the most important feature on how it will work and on what it depends is not in yet, and that's the reputation system. And what choices do you want to make? Is it too risky now, or do I have the life left that I want, or I want to risk spending in pursuing that goal? And if for most people, it's just too complicated to think about the potential feature that might work in tandem with 3 other depending features. And I mean, but there is a similar game out there that has a death
Soft
of a
death
spaceman mechanic. And I don't think anyone is thinking about it. It's
Dark Souls.
from Crytek, from Crytek, the game, the Hunt Showdown.
Oh, Hunt Showdown. Yeah.
Your characters die if you go in and you get killed after the 10th match. You leveled up your character. Your hunter dies, but you also have experience and stuff that goes into your account, which can you then adjust to the next hunter you will choose to play. But if you die over and over again after each match,
Your
then
experience is
it's a lot
dropping,
more difficult to go forward to. But also, you are not really attached to that character.
Mhm.
You only get attached to it if you progress in it.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Nice.
also, you get an around experience bonus. So it's not that bad. Yes, it's bad, but not rage quitting. I quit the game and I'm out bad, because Hunt Showdown works.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say that the other thing to the question is more, is this going to make people stop playing? People play hardcore MMOs all the time, like Path of Exile 2 and WoW have hardcore servers that people play, people enjoy, people want to have that thrill, and I think that's really going to be the differences. And Star Citizen's trying to thread the difference, like split the difference between these ideas, where if somebody's really invested in their character, they're going to play it like a hardcore MMO, like they don't want to die. So that's going to change how they play the game versus somebody who is playing the game as just getting in, go join myself. I might die a few times. I have a big death, whatever. I have to pay some fees and I move on. Like I got a little bit, I lost some experience, whatever. I pick myself up and keep going. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's the last question. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for, make sure you check out Algrid on the Info Runners. Check out Jail's channel, especially if you want to hear anything about alien languages and or UEE rank structure and UEE ship names and such.
and Vandal drinks and
Vandal drinks and such. Especially if you're interested in Squadron 42, a lot of people have watched some of my UEE Navy videos and were like, I want more stuff. If you want a lot of the detailed, very, very basic, or not basic, very like
granular.
Yeah, granular like look at the UEE rank structures or UEE ship ships names and where they came from and such. Check out Jail's videos and keep an eye out for Matt's and his lore series coming out pretty soon. His new lore channel. For right now, you can check out his Matt's Blue Eyes YouTube. All of those are linked in the description below. And if you did enjoy this, please join us live at twitch.tv/TheAstroPub. And for now, youtube.com/TheAstroPub live, where we do these lives on Saturdays at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Yes, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Love to have you come and ask your own questions to the cast. And remember to hit that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube, especially after the fact. And if you're watching this live, make sure you check out the Captain's Table Podcast YouTube, which is youtube.com/@the-Captain's-Table-Podcast. It's in the description below. Trying to build that channel up a little bit more because that's going to be where all of these videos live. And check us out on Spotify, the Captain's Table Podcast on Spotify. I'd love to see you there too. Thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out. And like I always say, hope to see you someday in the black.